I've bought and sold in 40 towns, and I can read a place in a single breath. This village can't even lie about itself properly. The headman just swore there's nothing here worth 1 copper, and he's right about the people, the dead fields, the empty barns. But he's standing on dirt that catches the sun the way dirt never should. And I have seen that exact shimmer once before in my life, in the only city where I ever bought gold. My name is Marcus. For 12 years I've driven this cart down every road a horse can survive. I buy cheap in one town and sell dear in the next, and the road has taught me one rule that's worth more than all the others. The man who sees the value first before anyone else does eats. Everyone else pays him right now. In this whole valley, I'm the only man alive who sees it. You came a long way for nothing, trader. The headman spits to the side. He owns the village and the land around it, and from the look of his face he's been trying to be rid of both for years. Soil's cursed. Rye dies. Wheat dies. People here eat roots and pray to whatever's listening. We've got nothing to sell you. I'd hand you a sack of dust if you were stupid enough to pay for it. I almost laugh in his face. He has just offered me a sack of dust, and he has no idea he means it literally. I crouch down, pretending to check the ruts for my wagon wheels. Up close the grains wink at me. Fine yellow flecks threaded through the gray earth. Scattered like a king spilled his purse here 100 years ago and never came back. In the gold city, the diggers called it carrier dirt, where it lies loose on the surface. The real metal sleeps underneath, sometimes a foot down, sometimes a man's height, sometimes deeper than any sane person would ever dig. My heart is slamming against my ribs. My face does not move a hair. So let me count my position out plain, the way I count everything. My cart holds salt, 3 bolts of dyed cloth, 12 iron knives, a barrel of good nails, and dried goods I can sell in any market on the continent. Call it 60 silver of stock. The horse and the wagon are 40 more, 100 silver, all of it on wheels behind me. It is every coin I own, 12 years of road, packed into one load, and I'm about to bet all of it on a guess about some dirt. I'll make you an offer, I tell him, standing back up. My cart, the horse, everything inside it. For your village, the land, the houses, every stick and stone of it, a clean trade. You ride off a wealthy merchant. I stay here and play the fool. He stares at me like I've sprouted a second head. A few villagers have drifted close enough to hear, and I watch the word fool pass from one mouth to the next down the line. You're mad, he says slowly. That wagon is worth more than this whole miserable patch 10 times over. Probably, I agree. Last offer. And here the headman begins the only arithmetic he has ever been any good at. 100 silver of goods, traded for a village that brings him nothing but grief and graves to dig. In his own mind, he is already a free man on the open road. He simply hasn't said the word out loud yet. He says yes. By the next morning, it's finished. The village clerk, an old man with a shaking hand, scratches both our marks onto a square of cured hide, and the headman climbs onto my cart, grinning like a boy who got away with stealing the pie off the sill. He snaps the reins. He does not look back. Not once. The last thing I hear of him is his laughter rolling away down the road. The laughter of a man absolutely certain he has just robbed an idiot blind. Let him laugh. Laughing is the cheapest thing a man can do. I've got 6 months of it owed to me, and I intend to collect every coin. That same morning, I stand on a flat stone in the middle of the village, the closest thing this place has to a square, and the people come to get a look at the new owner of their misery. Maybe 60 of them. Thin, gray-skinned, children with the swollen bellies of the half-starved. They don't look angry at me. They look tired. The particular tired of people who stopped expecting anything good a long time ago. My name is Marcus, I tell them. As of this morning, I own this land, which means I am responsible for every one of you. So I'll make you a single promise, and you can hold me to it until the day I die. I let it sit one breath. In 6 months, every person standing in front of me will be wealthy. Not fed, not scraping by. Wealthy. Silence. Then someone snorts. Then the whole square is laughing. Not cruel, just hollow. The laugh of people who have heard every flavor of lie a man can pour. Friend, an old woman calls out through the noise. You got robbed blind. These hills ain't worth 1 silver piece. You traded a fortune for the right to be buried with us. 6 months, I say, and step down off the stone. They drift back to their nothing, still chuckling, shaking their heads. Let them. The slap is coming, and it will land hard. I just have to dig it out of the ground first. One man didn't laugh. He's older than the clerk, older than anyone here has any right to be on root soup and prayer. He stands at the edge of the crowd with his arms folded, watching me exactly the way I watch the dirt, like he's testing whether what he sees in front of him is real. When the square empties out, he comes over, slow, leaning on a walking stick worn smooth as bone. You saw it, he says. It isn't a question. Saw what? Don't. He flicks the stick at me, almost irritated. I watched your eyes when you looked at the ground. Every other soul here sees mud. You saw the shine. His voice drops, and all at once his old eyes go sharp as a boy's. My grandfather saw it too. Used to swear up and down these hills were golden gold sleeping under the rock, just waiting on someone to wake it. Whole village called him a madman. He died poor in the same dirt he spent his life calling a treasure. The old man tilts his head at me, and now here comes a stranger who trades a wagon of silver for our graveyard and grins about it. So I'll ask you straight, you saw it, didn't you? I look at him a long moment. The first rule of the road is that you never tell a living soul what you're really carrying. But I'm going to need this village. And a village needs at least one man who believes before the proof is in his hands. What's your name? Jonas lived here 80 years, buried 2 wives and 4 children in this worthless ground. A dry, cracked smile splits his face. I'd dearly like to know I wasn't laying them down in a fortune the whole time. Then come and watch Jonas, I tell him, and bring me a shovel. I pick my spot at the foot of the nearest hill, where the carrier dirt runs thickest, where the yellow grains catch the light in one long seam down the slope. Jonas hands me a shovel with a cracked handle. It is, I'm told, the finest tool in the village, which tells you everything you need to know about the village. I dig a man's height down. There's still nothing but earth, and those teasing yellow flecks. The villagers wander back to watch the show. A merchant in good boots, sweating himself raw into a hole in the ground. It's better entertainment than they've had in a year. They lean on the fences. They lay little bets. One of them shouts that I'll dig clean through to the underworld before I scrape up a single coin. I keep digging. My palms blister and split against the cracked handle. The pit drops past my waist, past my chest, until I'm flinging dirt up over my own head, and the laughter above me has gone lazy and bored. Then the shovel hits something that is not dirt. The sound stops every voice in the village at once. It's not the dull knock of stone. It's a deep, heavy clang metal against metal, and it rides straight up the wooden handle into my arms like the ring of a struck bell. The bored faces above me freeze. Jonas grips the lip of the pit so hard his old knuckles go white. I drop to my knees in the dirt and dig with my bare hand. 2 meters down, where the carrier seam finally bottoms out into hard ground, my fingers close on something cold and dense and absurdly heavy. I rock it loose, brace it against my chest, and heave it up into the daylight. A nugget of raw gold the size of a grown man's fist. For one whole breath, not a single person up there remembers how to breathe. Above the pit, 60 starving faces stare down at a stranger cradling more gold than this village has seen in 100 years. Not one of them is laughing now. The old woman who called him a robbed fool has both hands pressed over her mouth. I turn the nugget slowly in my hands. It's beautiful. It is also a problem with more sharp edges than I can count on both hands. Because here's what nobody standing up there understands yet, and what's already crawling cold down the back of my neck. I was right. The hills are golden. Under this dirt sleeps a fortune deep enough to make every starving soul in that square richer than the lord who used to own them, and I can't reach it. 2 meters of digging through soft surface soil nearly tore my hands off. The real metal lies far deeper than this, locked inside rock that no cracked shovel will ever bite into. I have no diggers. I have no tools worth the name. I have no money. I traded all 100 silver of it for the privilege of standing in this hole in the ground. And worst of all, I'm holding in my 2 hands the one object in this world that turns kind neighbors into thieves and distant lords into wolves. The very instant word of it gets loose. 60 people just watched me pull gold out of the earth. By tomorrow morning, the secret is already gone. By tomorrow, the secret is gone, so I don't sleep on it. I sit by my pit half the night with a fist of gold in my lap, and one cold fact in my head. The metal is in the rock, deeper than any man can reach with his hands, and I have exactly 2 things working for me. I have a hole, and I have blistered palms that won't hold a shovel for a week. That's not a gold mine. That's a grave with potential. I need 2 things I don't own. I need a man who can shape iron, and I need a way to dig and haul that doesn't depend on my back giving out. One man standing at the bottom of a deepening pit cannot throw dirt 4 meters straight up over his own head. Try it once and you'll understand. I tried it twice. The village has one smith. Everyone tells me the same thing about him, in the same flat voice. Barren hasn't lit his forge in 3 years. Nobody orders work. Nobody has the coin to order work with. So the forge sits cold, and the smith sits beside it, drinking something he brews himself out of spite. I find him exactly where they said he'd be. The forge is dead, gray ash banked in the hearth. The man is broad through the shoulders the way smiths stay, even after everything else goes soft. And his eyes are the eyes of someone who decided a long time ago that nothing new is ever coming through his door. I don't argue. I don't promise him anything. I walk to his anvil and set the nugget down on it. The sound it makes, that dense, heavy click of solid gold on iron, sits him up straight. He doesn't touch it for a moment. Then he does. He weighs it in one scarred palm. He drags a thumbnail across it and watches the soft yellow scratch open. He sets his teeth to a corner of it and bites, gently, and feels it give the way only one metal in the world gives. Where? He says. One word. Under the hills, I tell him, which is true and useless, and exactly as much as he needs. There's more, a great deal more, but it's locked in the rock, and I can't get it out alone. I need iron tools, and I need machines, and I need a man who can make both. I let that sit. I'm told you used to be the best smith in 3 days' ride. I'm hoping you still remember how, and here is something the village hasn't seen in 3 years. The smith reaches for his hammer. His hand finds the worn grip without his eyes. The way a man's hand finds an old friend in the dark. Something behind his face wakes up. He lights the forge. Before I put a shovel back in the ground, the old man stops me. Jonas comes shuffling up the slope on his bone-smooth stick, while I'm pacing out where to dig next, and he watches me the way you'd watch a child about to put his hand in a fire. Don't, he says. Don't dig wherever your boot happens to land, boy. You'll wear those hands down to stumps chasing nothing. And you know better? I've buried family in this hill for 60 years. I know where the ground is soft and where it fights you. I know where water hides. He sweeps the stick across the slope. Look there. See how the grass goes rusty in that strip, browner than its neighbors. The ground's poisoned there with metal. And there, that gray stone, touch it. Go on. I touch it. It's damp, beaded with wet on a dry morning. Stone that sweat sits over a vein. Jonas says my grandfather taught me that, and his taught him. And the whole village laughed at the lot of us. He taps a spot 10 paces from my useless first pit, where the rusty grass and the sweating stone meet. Dig here, not there. He just saved me 3 weeks of digging blind. The whole memory of this ground lives in one old man, and everyone here spent 80 years calling it madness. Now the machine. I can't keep hauling earth out by the armful, and Boren can't forge fast enough to matter if I'm spending my strength on lifting mud. So I draw what I need on the soot-black wall of the forge with a stub of charcoal, 2 upright posts, a thick rod laid across the top between them, a rope wound round the rod, a bucket on the rope's end, and a crank handle off one side. Turn the handle, the rod turns, the rope winds up, the bucket rises full and comes back down empty. A windlass, old as the first well anyone ever dug, simple as breathing. Nobody in this village has ever built one. I'm a merchant, not a carpenter, and a leaning frame loaded with wet dirt will kill the man standing under it. So I need a builder. Someone tells me there's a fellow who went off and learned the trade in the city, then came home with empty pockets and a sour mouth. Galen. I knock on his door. He answers like he's expecting a bill collector, but I show him the charcoal sketch, and the sour look changes into something sharper, more interested. The look of a man who knows how to do a thing nobody's asked him to do in years. Whoever drew this doesn't know wood, he says, which is his way of saying yes. So we build it, and I'll tell you exactly how. Because the building is where it nearly goes wrong twice. First, the timber. Galen and I fell 2 straight pines from the stand behind the village, strip the bark, and trim them to posts a head taller than a man. We sink them on either side of Jonas's new pit and pack the holes with dirt. Second, the axle, the rod, the rope winds around. I make my first mistake here. I have Galen shape it from a length of seasoned oak, because oak is hard, and we have it. We hang the first loaded bucket, maybe 40 pounds of wet earth and crank. Halfway up, the oak axle splits down its grain with a crack like a snapped bone, and the bucket drops back into the pit and nearly takes a man's foot off. Lesson learned in front of everyone. Wood twists, wood splits. Wood will not carry a turning load day after day. I go back to Boren. He forges me an iron axle from his scrap, a thick rod, heated cherry red and hammered round. Then the part that matters. He heats it again and plunges it hissing into a trough of water to harden it. Then warms it gentle and slow, so it won't come out brittle as glass and shatter the first cold morning. Tempering, he calls it. The difference between an axle and an expensive iron stick. Third, the frame itself. Second mistake. We set the whole rig on the soft surface dirt, and the first time we crank up a truly full bucket, one post settles into the ground, under the weight, and the whole frame leans drunkenly toward the pit. Galen catches it before it goes over. Footing. He snaps, disgusted with himself. More than me. City rule. You don't build on what's under your boots, you build on what's under that. We dig the post holes twice as deep, pack them with stone instead of dirt, and brace the 2 posts together with cross timbers so they can't lean toward each other or away. The second frame doesn't so much as creak. Now the money counted out plain, because there isn't much of it. A traveling man keeps 2 purses. There's his trade and mine is gone, sold for this whole valley. And there's the thin road purse on his belt. The few coins for tolls and bread that a merchant never even calls wealth. Mine holds 7 silver and 1 bent copper. That's the entire treasury of the man who owns these golden hills. Boren has years of broken tools hoarded in a corner. That's our iron free. We fell our own timber. That's our wood free. But Boren's charcoal ran out 3 winters ago, and you can't temper iron on a cold fire. So 2 of my 7 silver go to charcoal carried in from the next valley, and 4 go to Boren himself for the hooks, fittings, and the iron axle, because a starving smith works for coin like any other man. That leaves me 1 bent copper. I keep it. It's the only piece of money I own that nobody's tried to take. But it works. God, it works. Now there are 2 of us on the gold. 1 man down in the pit filling the bucket. 1 man up top cranking the windlass and dumping it. The pit drops twice as fast as my back ever managed alone. And as it drops, the clangs come more often. That bell ring up the shovel that stops every heart for a breath. By the end of the week, we've pulled 4 nuggets, 1 near the size of the first and 3 smaller, plus 2 full buckets of gold-flecked sand we haven't even washed yet. I lay them out on a cloth in Boren's forge and we count. And for a moment, 3 grown men just stare at 4 lumps of yellow metal like they might vanish if we blink. Outside, the village has stopped laughing. They don't understand the machine, and they don't understand the old man's rusty grass, but they understand the look on the smith's face, and they understand that the stranger keeps coming up out of that hole with metal in his hands. The bets at the fence have quietly stopped. Then the 5th day, 4 meters down, my shovel comes up wrong. Not dirt, not the clean clang of metal. Mud, heavy, soaking, sucking mud. I drive the shovel in again and the hole behind it doesn't stay empty. Water slides in from the pit walls, dark and cold, and pools around my boots. I bail a bucket. The water rises past it, ankle to shin in the time it takes Boren to crank one load up top. By nightfall, the bottom of the pit is a black pond, and every bucket we haul comes up half water, half mud. No gold worth the lifting. The vein is right there. I can feel it under the wet, fist-sized and waiting, just below the waterline. And the earth has started fighting back with the one thing my shovel and my windlass cannot beat. I can lift dirt out of a hole now. I cannot lift a flood out of one. Not by the bucketful. Not fast enough. Not before the water wins. I need a machine that moves water, and I have one bent copper to build it with. You cannot bail a flood with a bucket. I learned this with my whole body by the second day. Arms dead to the shoulder, and the black water sitting exactly as high as when I started. For every bucket Boren cranks up the windlass, the soaked walls weep another one back in. The vein is a hand's width under that water. It might as well be at the bottom of the sea. Water doesn't want to leave a hole. That is the entire problem. It sits there and waits you out, heavy and patient, and there's always more of it. But water can be made to climb. I saw it once years ago, in a hot country far to the south, a muddy river feeding green fields that sat higher than the river itself, and at the edge of each field, a man turning a crank on a long tilted tube, and water walking up the inside of it against every law God wrote. I was there to buy pepper. I never looked close. I could strangle the younger version of myself for that right now, so I work it out on my own, because I have to. Water poured at the top of a slope runs down, but water caught in a pocket, a little trough that I lift and tip forward, then lift the next pocket behind it, and the next that water gets handed uphill, one step at a time. Wind a spiral up a shaft inside a closed tube, tilt the whole thing and turn it. Every pocket between the turns carries its mouthful a little higher, and passes it to the turn above. Crank long enough and water pours out the top end. We build it, a straight pine shaft for the core. Boren can't forge a clean spiral, so we wind it instead. Long strips of thin wood and boiled leather wrapped tight up the shaft in a screw, sealed hard with pitch. Around all of it, a tube built like a long thin barrel, staves bound with iron hoops Boren hammers out by lamplight. A crank at the top. The foot of it goes in the water. The first one does not work, and it nearly breaks me to watch it. We set it steep, almost upright, because steep feels right. Steep means the water climbs higher with every turn, doesn't it? I crank. The water churns, climbs 2 turns of the spiral, and then sheets straight back down past the blade and out the bottom. Nothing comes out the top. Nothing. I crank until my shoulders scream and the pit is exactly as full as before. Galen is the one who says it flat and certain. Too steep, lay it down. He's right, and once he says it, I see why. Stand the screw too upright, and the water can't rest in each pocket of the spiral long enough to be carried. It spills back over the lip of every turn faster than the turn can lift it. The screw isn't a ladder. It's a gentle slope pretending to be a wheel. Lower the angle and each pocket holds its water. We lay it back down, foot in the water, top resting maybe a third of the way up from flat. I crank. For 5-6 turns, nothing, and my stomach drops, and then the tube gives a wet bubbling cough and water climbs the inside of it, and pours out the top end in a thin, steady silver rope, splashing away downhill, away from the pit. The village comes to watch water walk uphill out of a wooden tube turned by a crank, and for the first time it isn't laughter on their faces. A few of them step back. One old man crosses himself. They have no word for what the stranger is doing, so the quiet ones decide it's something close to witchcraft, and even that doesn't make them leave. The pit drains. We dig deeper. And the deeper we go, the more the next problem grins at us. The walls. Wet dirt won't stand. The sides of the shaft begin to slump, mud sliding inward in soft, heavy tongues, filling back what we've dug. This is where Galen stops being the man who fixes my mistakes and becomes the man who keeps us alive. He's the only soul here who learned real building in the city before he came home with nothing. He tells me the shaft has to be shored cribbing, he calls it, a frame of stout planks braced hard against the walls so the earth can't move. I want it fast and light. Every hour spent shoring is an hour not pulling gold. And Elsa's food clock is already ticking in the back of my skull. Brace the worst stretch and we keep digging, I tell him. We're burning daylight. You brace it my way, Galen says, not loud. Or you bury a man, probably me, since I'll be the one down there fixing your shortcut. I overrule him on one section to save an afternoon. Half the braces he wanted. We dig on. That section comes down in the night. A whole wall of soaked earth slumps into the shaft before dawn and fills it 2 feet deep, swallows a bucket whole, snaps a brace like a twig. If a man had been standing at the bottom at first light, we'd be digging him out instead of the mud. Galen doesn't say a word about it. He doesn't have to. He just looks at me, and I look at the collapsed wall, and I eat it whole. Your way? I tell him. All of it. No shortcuts. From then on, the shaft gets full cribbing. Every section, planks wedged tight, and Galen checks each one himself twice, because the man cannot leave a thing half done without it gnawing at him. His daughter has been carrying timber this whole time, watching Lena 12, maybe 13, all elbows and quick eyes. While I'm sketching the next run of cribbing in charcoal, she takes the stub out of my hand, just takes it, and redraws it with the braces spaced even instead of by guess. and adds a little wedge at each joint to lock the planks tight against the wall. It's better than mine. She worked out in one glance what cost me a collapsed wall to learn. I start handing her the charcoal on purpose after that. But now there's too much. A pump to crank, a shaft to dig, a windlass to work, walls to shore, sand to wash. 3 men cannot do 5 men's jobs, and the gold is bottlenecked behind my own 2 hands. I need more backs, 5, 6 of them. And here's the trap with both jaws showing. You can't pay starving people in promises. And the one thing I do have, the gold is metal they can't eat tonight. So I take stock of what food this village actually owns and it turns my stomach. A few sacks of grain, a bin of roots, and the seed grain, the grain they've been hoarding to plant in spring. The thin difference between this year's starving and next year's. Add my own road rations, and it comes to this. Enough to feed 5 extra families, stretched hard for maybe 3 weeks. I bet all of it. I call the 5 strongest, hungriest families and lay it out plain. Full rations for your wives and your children, starting at supper tonight, plus a share of everything we pull from the ground. Not gold someday. Food now, and a real stake in what comes after it, is the whole village's survival on one throw. If the mine doesn't turn into more food before 3 weeks run out, we don't just fail. We starve a season early, having already eaten the seed. I know it. I make the offer anyway because standing still is just dying slower. The widow nearly says no. Elsa sharp-faced, sharper-tongued, 2 small children hanging at her skirts. You'll feed us a week and ride off like the last fool who owned us, she says to my face in front of everyone. But a week of full meals is more than this place has offered her in a year, and she has 2 children with the swollen bellies. And so she takes the deal for them. She makes very clear, not for me. And because she's the one person here who counts every single grain and trusts not one living man, I hand her the food stores and a ledger. You ration it. You write down every measure that goes out. You make sure no one steals and no child goes short, including mine. She takes the ledger like I've handed her a sword. From that hour, Elsa feeds the village and keeps the count. And I already know she'll be the one keeping me honest too. Word travels by morning. The stranger is hiring and there's food in it guaranteed. And here's the slap that was set. The day he stood on the flat stone and promised them wealth. The same people who leaned on the fence and bet he'd reach the underworld before he reached a coin are standing in the cold dawn outside the forge with their caps in their hands, asking for work. The old woman who called him a robbed fool can't lift her eyes to his. I don't make any of them grovel. I take my 5 families and tell the rest the truth. Soon. If this works, there's work for every back in this village. Soon. Now we're a crew. Pump turning. Walls shored Galen's way with no shortcuts left in me. 6 diggers in rotation. Elsa weighing grain by candle. Lena drawing what I can't draw as well as she can, and old Jonas tapping his stick along the rock, reading the vein, telling us where to chase it. The hole becomes a real shaft, 6 meters down. And the gold comes steady now by the end of the week, a cloth so heavy with nuggets, I can barely lift it one-handed, and 3 full buckets of washed gold sand beside it. More wealth than this whole valley has seen in living memory, sitting on a forge bench. And tonight is where the floor drops out from under me. Elsa comes to me after dark with the ledger and a face like cut stone. The food is nearly gone. 5 days of rations left, 6 if she shaves the portions thinner than is decent. The seed grain is eaten. The bet is almost called in. I look from her to the gold, the heavy yellow heap that was supposed to be the answer to everything. And the truth comes down on me, like that wall came down in the night. You cannot eat gold. You cannot feed a hungry child a nugget. And I cannot walk into the nearest town with a fist of raw gold and buy 3 months of grain. Because the instant a starving nothing of a village starts paying in gold, men with swords come to ask where it's from. The mining was never the hard part. I beat the mining. I beat the water and the walls in my own 2 hands. Here's the hard part, the one I never saw coming. I am standing over a fortune I cannot spend, with 6 days of food, and 60 souls now looking to me to feed them. Gold in the ground was a riddle of timber and iron and angles. Gold in my hands is a riddle of staying alive long enough to ever turn it into bread. 6 days of food and a fortune I can't spend. Most men would call that a cruel joke. I call it the one problem I've spent 12 years on the road learning to solve. I just spent those years standing on the wrong side of it. Here's the thing nobody in this village understands, and the one thing I understand better than any man breathing in this valley. Gold is not wealth. Gold is a promise that only pays out where it's safe to ask. In the right market, a fist of it feeds 60 people for a year. In the wrong place, it's a death sentence with a yellow shine. Digging it up was never the hard part. The hard part is turning it into bread without a single soul between these hills and the city ever wondering how a pauper came by gold. A starving village that suddenly pays in gold gets robbed by the next full moon. Lords hear about it. Bandits hear about it. Everyone hears, gold near home is a signal fire, so I do what a merchant does with a thing too valuable to be seen carrying. I make it boring. I make it far away, and I make it small. First far away. I'll sell nowhere near here. There's a market city 3 days down the road where no one knows my face, and no one has ever heard of this place. And there I'm just one more trader passing through with metal to change. A stranger selling gold in a strange city is Tuesday. A villager selling gold near his own village is a story that grows legs. Second boring. From this morning, this village does not mine gold. This village scratches iron. I gather the workers and I tell them, slow and clear, so it sticks. If anyone asks a passing peddler, a neighbor, a stranger at the well, we found a poor little seam of iron ore in the hills, barely worth the digging, just enough to buy bread. Iron is dull. Iron is legal. Nobody in the history of the world has saddled up to rob a village digging iron. Elsa hears it twice and starts walking the lie through the houses herself. By midday, everyone here mines iron, and a few of them half believe it. Third small. I do not ride into a city with a fist of raw nuggets. Raw gold straight out of the ground has its whole story written on its skin. Anyone who knows metal takes one look and thinks, someone dug this, and dug it close. So before I go anywhere, I take 2 nuggets to barren and have him melt them down into one plain ugly lump. A raw nugget screams where it came from. A melted lump says nothing at all. It could have passed through 100 hands, paid 100 debts in 100 towns. 2 nuggets. I bury the rest of the heap under the forge floor and tamp the dirt flat. 2 nuggets is not a fortune. 2 nuggets is just enough. I take Tom with me because I'm teaching him. I can't be the man who rides off every time there's selling to do the owner. Gone is the village standing undefended, and a body can only be in one place at once. So I take the quick lad, the one who is always first to the fence to mock me and loudest doing it, and I make him watch how every piece of this is done, so the next run down that road is his and not mine. We've got 1 half-dead mule between us and 3 days of walking. We take them. 3 days later, in a market city that has never heard the name of a dying valley, a goldsmith turns a plain lump of metal over in his fingers, scratches it, weighs it, and looks up at a calm, road-dusty stranger who haggles like a man who's done it 10,000 times and never once needed to. He pays. He asks where it came from. The stranger says, easy as breathing, that it was a debt settled in gold by a trader down south, and the goldsmith, who hears that exact answer twice a week, writes nothing down and forgets the face by supper. I walk out of that shop with a purse so heavy it changes how I stand. 300 silver for 1 ugly lump of metal. And now I do the part I actually know how to do. I spend it like a merchant restocking, not a man who struck a vein. A cart, sound and solid, and a strong mule to pull it 50 silver, and I'll admit there's a joke in it that doesn't escape me, that I traded my last cart for a village, and now the village's gold has bought me a new one. Then grain sack after sack of it, enough to feed 60 mouths for months, with seed grain on top to put in the ground come spring. Proper tools, finally. Iron picks that bite stone. Iron-shod shovels that don't crack. Coils of good strong rope. Charcoal by the barrel. Raw iron stock for barren to work. Salt, nails, the dull, vital, unglamorous bones of a place that intends to keep living. I load the cart, not a pouch of 70 silver onto my belt for whatever comes next, and we turn for home. A merchant and his boy with a wagon of grain and nothing on God's earth worth dying over. That's the whole picture. And the picture is the armor. The trouble starts on the 2nd day of the road home. It's nothing I can point to at first, just a feeling I earned over 12 years on bad roads, the back of the neck knowing before the eyes do. Then I see it. The same smear of dust behind us, holding the same distance too long. When I slow the mule to rest it, the dust slows. When I push the pace, the dust closes. Riders, 2, maybe 3, hanging back where a man minding his own business wouldn't hang. Don't turn around, I tell Tom. Quiet. Don't speed up, we're 2 poor fools with a cart of grain, and we're boring, because that's the rule the boy needs to learn first. Running tells a wolf you're worth the chase. We don't run. I keep the mule at its dull plod, slump my shoulders, let the cart creak along like it's carrying turnips and regret. Near a crossroads town, the road thickens with other traffic, and I steer us into the middle of it, cart to cart with strangers, and let the crowd swallow us. When the road empties out again on the far side, the dust behind us is gone, but I saw them. And worse, they saw the direction of us. A loaded cart rolling home, day after day, toward a stretch of poor hills nobody's looked twice at in a generation. On a low ridge above the valley road, 2 riders sit their horses and watch a grain cart trundle off toward the hills. A poor region, a poorer village, by the look of the smoke. And yet a man comes home down this road with full carts and a fat little purse on his belt. Iron, the story says. Nobody buys carts of grain off iron. The riders don't follow into the hills tonight. They don't need to. They mark the place, the way wolves mark a field, and they turn back to tell the others. I bring the cart in at dusk, and before I unload a single sack, I stop at the edge of the village and just look at it, because I need to see it whole. A few weeks ago, I bought a grave empty barns, gray, hopeless faces on a flat stone, laughing at the fool who'd robbed himself. That's gone. What stands here now, in the last orange light, the shaft, its windless frame black and solid against the sky, the water screw beside it that makes the earth give back what it tried to keep. 5 families coming out of their houses with color in their faces and meat in their bellies, hurrying to meet a cart they know is full. Barren's forge glowing red through the dark. A pouch of silver on my hip and a heap of gold sleeping under the floor. 60 people who laughed me off their square have bread for the winter now, because one stranger looked at the dirt and saw what their fathers swore was a curse. I built this from a hole and a guess. And then my eyes slide past all of it, out to the black line of trees at the mouth of the valley, where I know the way I knew about the dust, that something followed me home. The first wolves at the border. In a few short weeks, I turned a dying nothing into a place worth living in. And in those exact same weeks, I turned it into a place worth taking. That night, I can't sleep, so I walk the edge of the village in the dark while the others snore. And that's when I see it. A shape, low and slow, where nothing should be moving out past the last house, along the unguarded border between the village and the trees. Not a deer, not a dog. A man crouched, moving careful from shadow to shadow, stopping, looking, counting houses, counting the dark gaps where a wall ought to be and isn't. I go still as the stone I made my promise on. The wolves didn't wait for word to spread. They didn't wait at all. One of them is already here, tonight, in the dark, at the edge of everything I've built, measuring the walls this village doesn't have yet. And I have iron picks and grain and 70 silver. I do not have a single man who knows how to hold a blade. A man was counting my houses in the dark, and men don't count houses they don't plan to come back to. So I'm not going to lie awake guessing when. I'm going to decide what happens when they walk in. Let me count my own position first, honestly. The way I count from the scout, from the tracks, from 12 years of reading bad roads, I put it at 30 men, armed with real steel, and some of them men who've put that steel through other men before. Against them, I have 9 grown villagers who've never swung anything sharper than a hoe, 1 smith, 1 builder, 1 loud boy, 1 old man, and a widow with a ledger. I run the numbers twice. Both times the answer is the same. In a straight fight, we are corpses by breakfast, so we will not have a straight fight. I have exactly one advantage, and it's the only one that's ever mattered for me. I see the board differently than the man sitting across it. Those bandits think they're riding down on a defenseless village. I'm going to let them keep thinking that right up until the hills close around them. I can't make my farmers stronger in 2 days, but I can choose the ground they die on. And I have spent these last weeks learning the one trade in all the world that is nothing but moving earth and water and rock to exactly where I want them. There's only one way in that deserves the name, a narrow run between 2 steep hills, the defile that every cart and every raider has to thread to reach us. 3 men abreast, no more. That isn't a road. That's a funnel. And a funnel has a narrow end, and at the narrow end, you can do terrible things to whatever's packed in behind. We have 1 day and 1 night, and we don't sleep through either. We dig, because God knows we know how to dig now. 6 pits down the length of the defile, waist deep and wider than a man's stride. Floored with sharpened stakes boring hammers out by the dozen until his arm gives. We roof them with woven branches and a thin skin of soil and dust them over until the trap ground looks exactly like the rest of the road. In the gray dark, at a dead run, a man cannot tell the difference. His horse certainly can't. The water screw lifted a flood out of a pit. Turn the idea backward and it does the opposite. I set Tom and 2 men cranking it through the whole night, filling a trench up above the defile, a held pond of cold water behind a packed earth dam. Soak the floor of a funnel and a charge becomes a wallow. Loose the dam at the right breath, and a man down in the low ground is fighting the water before he ever fights us. At the mouth of the defile where the slope is loose scree over rotten stone, Galen and I undercut the hill, dig out the foot of it the same careless way a green miner brings a wall down on his own head, then hold it up with props we can knock loose by a rope from cover. Drop it once the raiders are inside, and the road they rode in on simply stops existing. Boren can't forge 30 swords in a night, and my farmers couldn't use them if he did. So he forges reach, and he forges pain. Long spears, shafts tall as 2 men, with a forked iron head, the one weapon a terrified man can hold in a line, and still be deadly with, because the bandit has to get past the point before he can reach the hand. And spikes, fistfuls of twisted 4-pronged iron, one barb always pointing up, scattered thick across the funnel floor, to lame the horses and the bare running feet. Last, behind the whole killing stretch, in the narrowest throat of the run, Galen throws up a wall overnight, sharpened logs sunk in a tight line, gaps left just wide enough to thrust a spear through. That's the entire trick. When you strip it down, we stand behind timber. They stand in the open, in the mud among the pits. Cover for us. Exposure for them. They come before dawn, the way scavengers always do. The bandit captain has run this 100 times. You come fast and loud in the gray half-light. The poor folk break and scatter like birds, and you take what you please from the ones too slow to run. Not once in his life has a poor village had an answer for him. He kicks his horse into the narrow gap between the hills, his men crowding in hard behind, and somewhere ahead in the dark, a boy he'll never see is holding a rope, waiting for a raised hand. The funnel goes to work, and it is not a battle so much as a butcher's floor. The horses hit the caltrops first and go down screaming, piling the men behind into a churning knot. The front rank hits the pits. The road just opens and drops them onto the stakes, and the press from the rear shoves 3 more in before the first scream finishes. When the defile is choked solid with floundering men and thrashing horses, I lift my hand. Galen's man cuts the props, and the rotten slope at the mouth comes down in a roar of rock and dust and seals the way out behind them. Then Tom looses the dam. The cold water comes down the funnel in a black sheet and turns the floor to a sucking quagmire, and the men still standing are penned in the low ground between a wall of fallen stone and a hedge of iron points. losing the fight with the mud before they lose it with us. Then comes the ugly part, the part no plan ever cleans up. Some of them get through. They claw up out of the muck and reach the palisade and get in among us. And this is where men with no skill and no armor bleed for the ground they're standing on. We win. But win is far too clean a word for the thing that's left when the light comes up. Peter, one of my 5, a digger, a father of 3 small children, takes an axe that was meant for the man beside him, and he does not get up again. 4 others are cut deep enough that Elsa spends the dawn with a needle and a pot of boiling water, and 2 of them will never swing a pick the same way. The screw is cracked through from a night of overwork. It will have to be rebuilt before the shaft can be cleared. The defile is a ruin of mud and stakes and dead horses. Half the grain I hauled 3 days to bring home is gone, spoiled or trampled in the scramble. The trench, the dam, the props, Boren's iron, weeks of labor, all of it spent in 1 gray hour. And now every soul in this village finally understands the thing I understood the night I first crawled up out of that hole with a fist of gold. What sleeps under us is not a blessing. It is a mark painted bright on every door we own. Those men did not ride 3 days for iron. But here's the other thing they understand now. The thing I didn't pay for and couldn't have bought. They watched a stranger they'd called a fool turn their dying valley into a thing that swallowed 30 armed men whole. The old woman who'd stood on the square and told me I'd traded a fortune for our graves, she stands over Peter's body in the first light, and then she crosses to me, and she does not apologize, because women carved out of years like hers never do. She lays one hard flat hand against my chest and says, "Tell us what to build, we'll build it." Behind her, the men who leaned on the fence and laughed me out of town are bending to pick the steel off the dead, and turning to look at me, waiting on an order. Not one of them is laughing, not one of them is going anywhere. This village stopped being a thing I bought sometime in that gray hour. It became a thing I bled for, with them. We pulled 4 of them out of the mud alive, the ones the water saved from the stakes. I am not a gentle man with people who rode here to put an axe through a child, and it does not take me long to get my answers. And what one of them gives me, spitting curses through broken teeth, chills me deeper than the dam water did. They did not pick us. Someone pointed them here. A man with coin, back in the market town. A man who knew there was silver quietly moving out of a poor iron village. Up in these hills, paid them to ride in, take it, and burn what was left standing. The bandit has no name for him, only that the coin was good, and that the man wore finer cloth than any road wolf has ever owned. So the wolf I killed tonight was never the wolf I should have feared. Something larger has already seen me. Something with money and patience, and the sense to spend cheap men first to test whether the lock had teeth, and which now knows that it does. The reward is cold in my hands. 30 dead and captured men leave 30 pieces of real steel behind them. Swords, axes, 2 bows, a few shirts of mail gone stiff with another man's rust. It is the first arsenal this village has ever owned, and I stand over the heap of it, and feel nothing close to rich. I feel like a man who has just learned the true size of the thing hunting him, and has only now far too late begun to count his own teeth. One clever trap saved us once. It will not save us twice. The next men won't come charging blind into a narrow gap, because the man who sends them will have learned exactly what I did to the last ones. We cannot keep living on surprise. We need the thing every place worth taking has always had, and this valley never did: a real wall, a watch that does not sleep, and men who know how to stand behind both. I have gold enough to build it. I have steel enough to arm it. And somewhere out past these hills tonight, a man in good cloth is hearing that his bandits never came home, and deciding, right now, what to send next. For weeks, this village has been a thing that only survives one disaster at a time. My own 2 hands on every single one. The water, the walls, the food, the bandits, each one beaten at the last breath, by me because there was no one else to beat it. That ends today. A man who has to touch every problem himself doesn't own a village. He owns a very tired one-man show with 60 exhausted spectators. So after the bandits, I stop running the show and start building the machine. I gather them and I divide the work the way I used to divide a caravan, every man to the thing he's best at. And not one of them left standing idle waiting for me to do his thinking. Boren takes the forge and everything made of iron. Galen takes building all of it, every post and plank. Tom takes keeping us breathing, the watch, the weapons, the warning. Elsa takes the stores and the count, every grain that comes in and every ounce that goes out. Old Jonas takes the ground itself, because the only map of these hills that has ever existed lies behind his eyes. And the girl, Lena, takes the drawing board beside me, because she can see a machine finished in her head before I've finished scratching it on the wall. Then we build all of it at once, because the man in the good cloth is not waiting, and neither will I. Galen takes the wall, and he takes it the way Galen takes everything, which is too seriously and exactly seriously enough. We mark a line around the heart of the place, the houses, the shaft, the forge, and we start felling. 40 straight pines off the slope behind us, each a head and a half taller than a man. We strip them, char, and sharpen the buried ends so the wet ground can't rot them. And Galen makes us dig the post trench deeper than anyone thinks is needed, and pack every post with stone, because he learned in a collapsed shaft exactly what happens to anything he lets me talk him into building light. He never lets me talk him into it again. At the 2 corners that face open ground, and 1 more above the throat of the defile, where the bandits died, he raises towers. Platforms on 4 tall legs, high enough that a man up top can see a rider a mile off. Tom takes those towers and the dead men's steel and turns them into teeth. He sorts every able body in the village into watches 3 shifts, turning day and night, so the platforms are never once empty. He ties a ram's horn to each tower. 1 long blast means riders coming. He drills them until even the grandfathers know which way to run and what to snatch off the wall on the way. The loud boy who was first to the fence to laugh at me is first up the ladder every gray dawn now, counting the tree line before the rest of us have our eyes open. While the wall climbs, I go down, because the mine has outgrown the way we dig it. The shaft is deep now, and the windlass that lifts 1 bucket has become the slowest thing we own. The true bottleneck is in the dark at the bottom. Men hauling broken rock from the working face to the foot of the shaft in baskets on their backs, staggering over rubble 1 load at a time. So I draw the answer for Lena on the soot of the forge wall, a cart that rides a track. 2 timber rails laid dead level along the floor of the gallery, grooved down their length, and a cart whose wheels sit in the grooves, a box that swallows 10 baskets at once, and rolls so easy a child could push it full, because the track carries the weight, not a man's spine. Galen lays the rails true and level, and for once his stubbornness is the whole point. Barren forges the axles and bands the wooden wheels with iron so they can't split, and the first cart we build jumps the rail at every bend and spills its load across the floor, because the wheels wander off the groove the moment the line so much as curves. Lena fixes it. She sits with that spilled cart most of an afternoon, chin in her hands, and comes back with a wheel that has a lip, a raised flange on the inner rim that hooks down over the rail and simply will not let the wheel stray, bend or no bend. We band every wheel her way after that, and the cart runs the track like it's gliding on ice. 1 man, 1 cart, 10 baskets a trip, rolling out of the dark, and we move more stone in an hour than the whole crew moved in a day on their backs. And then we nearly drown in our own success, because all that stone we're hauling out is shot through with gold sand, and we have been washing sand the way the whole world washes it, 1 pan at a time, a man swirling a single bucket in water for an hour to trap a pinch of dust. 6 men panning dawn to dark can't keep pace with 1 cart, so I draw the sluice. A long trough on a gentle slope, planks for the sides and floor, and across that floor a row of low crossbars riffles. Feed the water screw stream in at the top, shovel raw sand in behind it, and let the water do the sorting for us. The light dirt washes straight through and out the foot of the trough. The gold, being heavy, sinks and lodges behind the bars, every one of them, the whole way down. At dusk you lift the riffles out and sweep up a fortune in dust that the water gathered while we did other work. Galen builds the trough. Lena paces the riffles too far apart, and the gold rides over them and escapes. Too close, and the whole thing chokes, and she walks it until she finds the spacing. We run the screws water down it, and the gold sand stops trickling. It pours. We wash a full cart of it in the time it used to take to pan 1 bucket. A traveler cresting the rise above the valley would not believe the report he'd been handed. Below him, where a starving village rotted a single season ago, something runs like 1 body with a dozen hands, a wall climbing log by log, towers with watchers turning slowly at their posts, carts rolling out of the side of a hill on rails and tipping their loads, a long trough flashing with bright running water while men feed sand into the top of it. Whatever this is, it is not the thing a poor village does to scratch a little iron out of bad ground. And while the machine hums, Jonas takes me by the sleeve, and the old man's eyes have that sharp young fire in them again. "You've been farming the edges, boy," he says. "The sand, the little lumps, pebbles off the top of the table." He thumps his stick against a fold of rock deeper into the hills, where the grass burns the rustiest and the stone weeps wetter than anywhere I've yet seen. My grandfather always swore the heart of it sat right here, where the hill itself is rich. Dig here, and you'll stop sweeping up dust. We dig, and 4 men deep past, where any cautious miner would have laid down his pick. The iron stops biting dirt and starts ringing on metal, not pebbles, not fist nuggets. We clear the stone away around it, and the whole crew just stands there in the lamplight without a word, because half sunk in the rock beneath us is a single nugget the size of a grown man's head. Past it, another, and the rock all around them throws the lamplight back in a dozen places, a seam of the stuff running down and down into the dark. This is the heart. Jonas's grandfather died swearing was real. Gold not by the pinch, not by the fist, by the boulder. And I cannot lift a single piece of it. The windlass that hauls a bucket of sand would snap its rope and splinter its frame under one of these. These nuggets lie deep, and they are vast, and every gentle little machine that built everything I own was made to lift a bucket, not to drag a stone of solid gold up out of the earth. I stand over the richest thing I have ever seen in my life, near enough to lay my palm flat against it, and I have no way on God's earth to get it to the surface. That evening, I climb up out of the shaft and stop at the lip to look, because I need to measure how far we've come against where I started. Weeks ago, 1 hole, 1 cracked shovel, One man with ruined hands and 60 starving people laughing him off a flat stone. And now, a true mine. A shaft shored in honest timber. A pump that empties it. Rails running carts up out of the dark. A sluice pouring gold sand by the cartload. A wall rising around the whole of it. 3 towers with watchers, a horn ready to sound, 30 blades in the rack, 60 people moving through all of it with full bellies and a place to be. Every one of them to a task, the whole valley running like the caravan I used to lie awake wishing I owned. Hunger became supper, a grave became a mine. We built this and it is working better than I ever dared promise them. Which is precisely when the horn sounds from the tower, one long blast rider, not a band of them, one. And when he comes up the track to my half-finished wall, I see in a heartbeat he is nothing like the wolves we put in the ground. He sits a fine horse. He wears clean cloth in colors that mean something. A crest worked on the breast, a lord's livery, the kind of cloth a bandit only ever sees on the corpse he's stripping. His eyes move over my wall, my towers, the carts, the bright trough, and I watch him add the whole sum up and find that it doesn't balance. You'll be the new man, he says, pleasant and cold as well water. My lord has heard the strangest little thing, that this village, this poor humble village, has begun to dig, a pause, the smallest possible pause, before the word. Iron, out of these hills, he smiles, and there is not one drop of warmth anywhere in it. My lord finds that very interesting indeed. He wishes to make your acquaintance. The man in the good cloth has finally sent his own face instead of his wolves, and that little pause he left hanging before the word iron tells me everything I need to know. He never believed it for a single breath. I send the herald back to his lord with the dullest answer I own. We are honored. Tell him poor folk scratching a little iron out of bad ground, glad of a great man's notice, at his service whenever he cares to come. I bow exactly the right amount and make myself look as harmless as a man can look. He rides off unconvinced because he was never going to be convinced of anything, and I watch his dust trail down the valley and start counting days, because the herald changed the shape of my problem. It is no longer enough to dig the gold and hide a few melted lumps under the forge. The Baron is coming to look, and 4 men deep in my shaft sits a vein of nuggets the size of a man's skull. The single most incriminating thing a poor iron village could possibly own. I cannot leave that in the ground for some lord's expert to stumble onto. I have to get it out and melted and gone before the man in the good cloth ever lays eyes on it, which means I have to lift half a ton of solid gold up out of the earth, and I have to do it this week. We try it the only way we know first. We sling a rope around the smallest of the great ones, still heavier than 2 grown men, and put the whole crew on the windlass. The rope draws tight. The frame Galen built to raise a bucket of sand begins to scream. The nugget shifts, lifts a hand's width off its bed, and then the rope parts with a crack like a whip. The gold slams back down into the rock, and a digger named Halls keeps his foot only because Tom hauls him backward by the collar. The lesson is fast and it is ugly. The machines that built everything I own can lift a bucket. They cannot lift a boulder. A rope and a crank made to move a basket of sand will snap and shatter and kill the moment you ask them to move a stone that weighs as much as 4 men. I don't need a stronger version of what I have. I need a different kind of machine entirely, one that doesn't lift the weight so much as cheat it. I draw it on the forge wall with Barren and Galen leaning in over my shoulder, and I explain the trick, because they cannot build what they don't understand. A rope over a single wheel, I tell them, only turns your pull around a corner. You still haul the whole weight. I draw the next part. But run that rope down through a wheel on the load, and back up, and down, and back. So one rope holds the weight in 4 strands at once. Now each strand carries only a quarter of it. Pull the loose end and you raise the whole boulder while lifting just a quarter of its weight. Barren scowls at the wall. Where's the catch? There's always a catch. He's a smith. He knows nothing in this world is free. Distance, I tell him. To raise the gold 1 foot, you must pull 4 feet of rope through your hands. You trade the length of the pull for the strength of it. And that's a trade I'll make every time, because we have rope to spare and arms to spare. What we don't have is 20 men who can heave 4 men's weight straight up by main force. So instead of getting stronger, we cheat. That is the whole heart of it. A block and tackle wheel stacked in 2 blocks, the rope threaded back and forth between them, multiplying a man's force at the cost of the distance he pulls. Barren's part is to forge bigger than he has ever forged in his life. The sheaves, the wheels that ride inside the blocks, and the great hooks, and iron bands for the pivot, and chain for the few links where I won't trust a rope at all. His first cast sheaves crack clean through under a test load, and he curses and makes them thicker, bands them in iron, and slowly learns the smith's harder trade, working heavy metal hot and patient instead of fast. The man who shod mules a season ago is casting crane iron by lamplight now and getting it right. Galen's part is the derrick itself. A mast of the heaviest timber, we can drop 3 of the great old pines, none of your slim ones, raised over the shaft and braced, with a boom, an arm, to swing the load out clear of the hole once it's risen. And the foundation, because half a ton hung off the end of a boom, wants nothing more than to pull the whole mast over onto its face. The first time we load it, the mast leans toward the shaft like it means to dive in after the gold, and Galen catches the danger before I do. He fixes it the way he fixes everything, which is more thoroughly than anyone asked. Footings sunk deep and packed with stone, stays roped from the masthead down to anchors, driven hard into the ground, and a counterweight, a cradle of rock slung off the back of the boom to balance the gold on the front. After that, the mast stands as if it grew there. Lena's part is the numbers, and they are the part that would have beaten me. How many strands of rope, hauled by how many men to raise a boulder that outweighs 4 of them? She works it on a slate with the tip of her tongue between her teeth. If 4 strands means each man pulls a quarter, and a hand of men should lift 4 men's weight, then she scratches and crosses out and scratches again 6 strands, threaded just so, and 6 men on the end can raise what 60 could not. She is 13 years old, and she has solved with a slate a problem of pure force that I would have brute forced straight into another splintered frame. 2 pieces remain. You cannot put a hook on a smooth lump of gold. It would slip free and drop a fortune onto somebody's skull. So Boren and the women knot a net, heavy rope and chain woven into a cradle that wraps the boulder and grips it from every side at once, so that, however it sways, it cannot slide loose. And the winding 6 strands of tackle means 6 times the rope to haul, and arms give out. So we raise a capstan, a stout upright drum set into the ground, with long lever bars driven through its head like the spokes of a wheel laid flat. Men set their chests to the bars and walk a slow circle, and the drum winds the cable in steady and strong. And where the men flag, we put the mule to a bar. Many backs, or one patient beast, turned into a single pull that does not stop. Then comes the day, and the whole valley stops to watch it happen. The net is down in the shaft, lashed tight around the first of the great nuggets, bigger than a man's head, heavier than 4 men together. The tackle hangs ready from the boom, the capstan is manned, 6 at the bars and the mule on the 7th. Galen stands at the foot of the mast with one palm flat against the timber, feeling for the first whisper of give. Boren watches his chains, Lena watches her rope, and every other soul in the valley crowds the lip of the shaft, dead silent, leaning in over the dark. I drop my hand. The crew leans into the bars and walks. The cable lifts off the drum and draws tight, and then it begins to sing a high, thin, terrible hum, rope strained to the very edge of what rope can hold. The boom creaks. The counterweight of stone swings and groans on the back of the arm, and far down in the shaft the great nugget tears free of its bed with a deep, wet, shuddering heave that I feel come up through the soles of my boots, and it rises. On a hilltop a mile off, a shepherd who has watched this valley his whole gray life stands frozen with his crook in his hand, staring at a thing that has no business existing. A tall wooden engine over a poor village, and something heavy and bright turning slowly in a net beneath its arm, climbing out of the ground into the morning sun. He has no word for it. He will tell the story badly in 3 taverns by nightfall, and not one man will believe him. Inch by inch the gold climbs the dark, swinging slow in its cradle of rope. No one breathes. Galen's hand never leaves the trembling mast. And then the boulder breaks the lip of the pit and swings out into open daylight. A stone of solid gold turning gently in a net, dull and shining at once, throwing the sun back into 60 upturned faces. Galen leans his weight on the boom and swings the arm around, and the gold drifts out over firm ground, and we lower it down, and it beds into the earth with a sound like the closing of a vault. The valley comes apart. 60 people who buried their last hope a season ago are screaming and weeping and hammering each other's backs. And through it all, old Jonas walks to the gold on his bone-smooth stick and lays both his hands flat upon it and simply stands, the tears cutting down through the dust on his face and to his beard. He told the truth. He says to no one, to all of them, to a grandfather 60 years in the ground. The hills were golden. He wasn't mad after all. And I, his old voice cracks clean in half, I lived to see it. None of it came free, and I'd be lying to pretend it did. The crane devoured a whole stand of our finest timber, and the better part of Boren's iron, and a fortnight of every strong back that could otherwise have been cut in gold. And the force we taught those ropes to hold is a killing force the instant it slips. On the 3rd lift, a cable we'd trusted one haul. Too many let go under load and whipped back across the yard like a living thing. And only because I had already cleared every man from under the load did we dress a torn shoulder by firelight that night, instead of digging a second grave beside Peter's. After that, the rules go iron hard. No soul stands beneath a raised load or in the line of a strained rope. Ever. The net double-rigged. Always. Every cable retired the moment it frays. We have learned what this much power costs when a man respects it, and came within a hand's breadth of learning what it costs when he doesn't. And now I stand over the single greatest piece of wealth I have ever laid eyes on, and it is a noose with a golden shine. Because there is no story under heaven that explains a boulder of solid gold in the yard of a poor iron village. You cannot drape a cloth over it. You cannot call it ore. One glance and the dullest man alive knows exactly what these hills are, and the man in the good cloth is already on the road. The Baron is coming to make my acquaintance, coming to look, and the most incriminating object in the world is lying in my yard, glittering in the sun. I have days, maybe fewer. Every shining ounce has to be melted, buried, and gone before a lord's eyes ever find it. The hard part was never lifting the gold. The hard part, once again, is not dying for the crime of having it. We melt the giant the night before he comes. It takes Boren's forge running till dawn to turn that head-sized boulder into a row of dull, anonymous lumps, and we bury them deep beneath the forge floor with the rest. And we rake the yard until there is nothing left to see but a poor village that scratches iron from bad ground. By the time the Baron's banners crest the valley road in the morning, there is not one bright ounce of gold anywhere a searching man could find it. Good thing, too, because the man who rides through my half-finished gate is not a man who misses things. Baron von Drake comes with 30 knights in mail at his back, a banner, a clerk on a mule, the whole apparatus of a lord making a point. He is not what I braced for, not a fat, greedy brute. He is lean and well-kept, with clever, tired eyes that have weighed 1,000 men and found most of them simple. He looks at my wall and my towers the way a buyer looks at a horse he already intends to own, and when he finally speaks, his voice is soft and pleasant, and there is a blade under every word of it. "You bought a village," he says, not troubling to dismount. "How charming, but you understand, I hope, what you actually bought." He gestures easy at the hills, the valley, the whole of the world around us. "All of this is held of me. The man who sold it to you was my tenant, and so, new man, now are you, which means you owe me precisely what he owed me, and a good deal more it seems. Now that you found something in my ground worth the digging." A thin smile. Iron, I'm told. Then he names his terms soft as falling snow, and each one is a hand around my throat. A levy on the land and all it yields, paid to him each season. A fee for his protection, his knights, after all. Keep the roads safe, and safety is not free, and the right of first purchase. Anything dug out of his hills, he buys first, at his price, before one cart of it ever sees a market. That last one is the knife, and he knows it is. The right of first purchase means every iron cart that leaves this valley passes under his eyes and his hands. The day he decides to actually look inside one of those carts, the whole game ends. I count my position, because I always count my position. He has 30 knights bred to war since they could walk. I have farmers holding bandit steel and one clever boy. He has a stone castle. I have a wooden wall that isn't finished. And worst of everything, he has the law. Every word he has spoken is true and lawful. And if I raise a hand against my own overlord, I am not a man defending his home. I am a traitor. Any lord in the realm may lawfully hang from his own gate. I cannot win this with walls. I cannot win it with steel. So I win it the only way I have ever won anything in my life. I make him an offer. First, I make myself small. I am humble. I am poor. I show him a thin, struggling iron operation, barely keeping 60 souls in bread. The wall is for bandits, my lord, who came once already and near butchered us in our beds. The machines are only a desperate man's tricks to wring a hard living out of hard ground. I lay before him exactly the picture I built this whole masquerade to show. A small, struggling, harmless little thing, beneath a great man's concern. Then I pay him, in silver. I count 100 good silver coins into his clerk's waiting hands. A fair levy, a generous one, the kind of payment that says, here's a willing tenant, and no trouble worth your trouble. Silver, never gold, not 1 grain of gold. Gold would be a confession written in metal. Silver is merely a poor man who scraped together just enough to stay on his lord's good side. And last I sow the doubt, the oldest move I own. I make myself worth more to him alive than dead. My lord, I tell him soft as he is soft, a village that pays you every season is a far better thing to own than a village you must garrison and bleed. Let me dig my poor iron and pay you your due, and I will be the quietest, most profitable little holding on your books, coin in your hand every season. No cost, no trouble. Burn it down, and all you'll own is ash and graves that pay you nothing. It is the whole gospel of every trader who ever lived. In 3 sentences, do not kill the chicken that lays. He takes the silver, he takes the deal, and he rides away. Von Drake goes back down the valley with a purse of good silver he did not own this morning, and he is not a satisfied man. He is a curious one. He has held poor villages his whole life, and poor villages do not pay their levy in clean silver coin without flinching, and they do not raise engines a master mason would envy, to scratch out a metal a man can pull from any bog in the kingdom. The new man is lying to him and lying beautifully. Von Drake respects it, and he means to learn exactly how rich the lie is. That night I lay it bare for Barren and Galen and Jonas, because it is too heavy to carry alone, and there are 2 roads in front of me, and both of them have teeth. The first road is to keep paying him. Feed him silver every season. Hold the mask in place. Buy time. But a fed wolf does not wander off. It comes back hungrier. His price will climb. His patience will thin. And one season he will stop taking my word and come to see the truth with his own eyes. The second road is to go over his head. There are powers above a baron, a count, a duke, the crown itself. I could seek a higher protector, a charter, some great seal that lifts these hills out of Von Drake's reach for good. Jonas says it before I can finish the thought. You go crying to the king about gold, boy, the old man says. And you'll learn what a king does about gold. He doesn't ask for a slice like the baron. He takes the whole pig and hangs you for having kept it from him. He is right, and it cools the blood in me. The baron is a wolf I might yet manage. The crown is a thing I cannot fight, cannot buy, and cannot survive being noticed by. Better the devil at my gate than the one on the throne. So I choose the first road. For now, keep paying, keep lying, keep buying days, and pray that days are enough. Time runs out faster than I bargained for. 3 days later, Von Drake comes back, and this time he does not bother with the velvet. He rides up to my gate and his clever eyes are cold all the way through. I have had the most interesting whisper, he says, about the sort of iron a man digs out of these hills, about a stone in particular particular lifted from your shaft. Not a week gone, a stone it took a great engine to raise off the ground. He lets it hang. Iron does not grow in stones too heavy for a man to lift. New man, and the floor drops clean out from under me, because there is only one way on this earth that he can know about the giant. We melted it to lumps the night before he first set foot here. No cart carried word of it. No stranger laid eyes on it. The only living souls who watched that gold rise up out of my shaft were the 60 people of this village. Someone here is his. Someone I feed. Someone I armed with bandit steel and put on my own wall. Someone who stood at the lip of that shaft and wept with all the rest. When the gold broke the daylight, went to the Baron in the dark and sold me for his coin, and I do not know which face it wears. Somewhere down in the village that same night, a figure the new man would never think to doubt watches the forge fire burn late through a shutter crack, and weighs in one hand the worth of everything seen, and in the other the worth of a baron's silver. Von Drake watches the understanding break across my face, and he smiles, because he sees it land. I think, he says, gathering up his reins, unhurried, that I shall have a look at this iron of yours myself. My own man down your shaft with my own eyes upon whatever he finds there. 3 days. He turns his fine horse for the road. Have your mind ready for inspection, and I do hope for the sake of your 60 souls that what he finds at the bottom of it is iron. 3 days to make a gold mine look like an iron scratch. 3 days with a traitor living inside my own wall, carrying everything I do straight to the one man I most need to deceive. I have beaten water, I have beaten rock, I have beaten 30 armed men in a funnel of mud and stakes. Now I have to beat a clever lord's own expert standing at the bottom of the richest shaft in the kingdom, and I have to do it with someone at my back I cannot see and dare not trust. The hard part was never the gold. It is always the men who want it. 3 days to turn a gold mine into a poor man's iron scratch, with a traitor watching me do every part of it. So I tell no one the whole of the plan. Not one soul holds every piece but me. Whoever is selling me to the Baron can only sell what they're handed. So I hand each man his own small task and nothing else, and keep the shape of the lie inside my own skull where no coin can reach it. Then we work like the devil is at our backs, because in every way that matters, the crane comes down first, because no man alive builds that engine to lift iron. We can't make a thing that took a fortnight to raise simply vanish in 3 days, but we can pull its teeth. Galen and his crew drop the boom, strip off the tackle and the net, draw out the great pulleys, until what stands over the main shaft is a bare, dumb timber frame that might be a hoist for ore or logs and nothing grander. Then we deal with the shaft itself, the rich one, with Jonas's gold seams still glinting in its walls. We board it over, heap it with spoil and cut timber and broken tools and seed weeds across the mound until it reads as a played-out hole left to rot a season ago. The richest 2 meters of rock in the kingdom, buried under a rubbish pile. And then we build them a lie to find instead. Jonas walks me to a side gallery, in the lower works where the stone runs rusty and wet and dead, the iron-stained rock he taught me to tell from the true vein, the kind that promises gold to a fool and hands him nothing. We timber it honest, run a cart down it, hang the lamps, and dress it as a working mine. Poor, hard, and sad. The sort of mean little hole a desperate man bleeds a living out of. Boren makes it smell true. He smelts the iron-stained rock in a low hearth, real iron, crude gray blooms of it, and scatters the slag in heaps. Leaves half-worked lumps cooling by the fire. Keeps the smelter breathing so the whole place reeks of charcoal and hot metal. Let the expert watch iron being born out of the ground. Nothing in this world convinces a man like a thing he sees happen with his own eyes. But the real work is the work inside my own head, and Jonas pours it in. A master won't be fooled by props, boy, he tells me. He reads the rock. You'll have to read it better, or at least talk as though you can. So for 3 days the old man teaches me his 80 years of these hills, which stone means gold, and which only pretends, what the rust is and what the wet is. Why the rich seam sits where it sits while the rock around it lies barren. He teaches me the lies the land itself tells, so that when the expert points at the thing that troubles him, I'll have a true answer ready that points away from the gold. And Elsa takes the people. She goes hut to hut, and every full belly learns to look hollow. Every new tool goes under the floorboards. Every shawl bought with gold goes back into the chest. She drills them the way Tom drills the watch, where to stand, what to say, what never to let slip. A child with a new carved horse nearly undoes us in rehearsal. Elsa takes the toy, and the child weeps, and she does not bend, because one bright thing in one small hand could hang every soul here. By the third night, 60 prosperous people can play 60 starving ones well enough to break a stranger's heart. The Baron comes on the third day, and he brings the man I actually fear. The expert is old and dry and terribly sharp-eyed, a master of minds, the kind of man who has spent his whole life with his palm flat on stone and cannot be lied to by a surface. He does not glance at the village, or the wall, or me. He looks at the rock. He taps it, smells it, scratches it, holds chips up to the light and turns them. And worst of all, because of the whisper the traitor sold him, because the Baron already half knows the truth. He is not here for a lazy look. He is hunting gold, and he knows exactly what he is hunting for. He walks straight past the mouth of my show gallery and stops, of course, at the weed-grown mound over the real shaft. And this, played out, master, I say easy as breathing, struck water and rotten rock both at once, lost 2 men's labor to a cave-in, and sealed it for safety. He studies the mound a long, long moment, and then he moves on, because there is nothing to see but rubbish and weeds, and not even a master can read rock he cannot reach. In the gallery he finds the rust and the sweating stone, Jonas's own gold signs and his eyes narrowed to slits. This staining, you'll know what iron rust on wet stone can sit above. He is testing me. He is paying out the rope and waiting for me to hang myself with it. I take Jonas's lesson, and I do not. I know what fools believe it sits above master. We believed it too. Our first month here washed the rusty rock a whole season expecting yellow. Got a pinch of trace off a ton of spoil. Not worth the candles we burned finding it. It's iron staining. The wet is only groundwater. If there were a vein under that rust, I'd be a rich man, and not a poor one begging a great lord's patience. And I let him hear the real bitterness of a man who hoped once, and was disappointed the truest sounding thing there is. Then he finds the fleck. A single bright speck we missed, winking in the staged rock. He plucks it free and holds it to the light, and my heart stops dead in my chest. A trace, as I told you, I say, before he can. Gold and iron lie down together in trace. Here and there in these hills a pinch a week, if you slave for it. You cannot feed 60 mouths on a pinch a week. And I turn him to Boren's iron, the grey blooms, the slag heaps. This is what this ground actually gives a man, master. Iron, hard, poor, honest iron. The master of mines has been lied to by clever men before, and he knows the particular taste of it on the back of the tongue. Nothing the new man says is false. The sealed shaft, the trace gold, the iron, the great timber frame, every answer is sound, and that is precisely the thing that troubles him, because a poor ignorant peasant does not have a sound answer ready and waiting for every question a master can throw. The man knows far too much of rock to be the fool he plays at being. But knowing is not proving, and there is iron in this ground, and slag on the heaps, and not one single grain of gold he can put into the baron's hand. So he holds his tongue for now. The baron, though, is no master of mines. The baron sees a dead sealed hole, a sad little gallery, grey iron, and 60 starving wretches, and his clever face curdles into plain contempt. Von Drake rides out of the valley sour and dismissive, already half forgetting it exists. He let a whisper and his own appetite persuade him there was a fortune buried under a dunghill, and there was only ever a peasant scratching iron and lying about one heavy stone to make himself seem grander than he is. The new man is a fool with delusions. Von Drake decides exactly like the last fool who owned this worthless dirt, and well beneath a baron's further notice. There it is, the very same slap I gave the man who sold me this village, handed now to a lord with 30 knights at his heel. He believes he beat me. He believes I am a harmless idiot, and he never once saw that I beat him with the one thing he was certain a peasant could not own, a sharper mind than his own. But I don't get to savor it, because winning this cost me more than a lost fight ever could. For 3 days the gold shaft stood sealed beneath a heap of trash and gave us nothing. The crane lies in pieces and will take a week of labor to make whole again. Every strong back that might have been cutting gold spent itself raising a false mine that yields nothing but a lie. I poured 3 days and a fortune in labor into the ground and dug out exactly one thing. A little time, and worse than the gold not mined is what the lie did to my people. You cannot make 60 souls live a falsehood, and play at starving, and watch their own neighbors for a traitor's face, without something beginning to rot. The fear that was a fist against the bandits has turned inward and gone foul. A woman tells me to my face, low and shaking, that she did not claw her way out of starving to spend her life pretending she's still in it. That she'd sooner be poor and honest than rich and hunted, and she is not the only one thinking it. The lie is eating the very thing the gold was meant to save. And standing there watching the baron's dust trail away while my own people's faces close like shutters, I finally see the trap I've built around my own neck. You cannot hide a gold mine. Not forever. The baron will come back. The expert smelled a thing he couldn't name, and men like that don't forget a smell. One day the lie will crack down the middle, and a village that owns nothing but a secret owns nothing at all. Hiding was never going to save us. It only ever bought days. If we mean to keep any of this, the gold, the village, our necks, we need 2 things no clever staging can ever fake. We need real strength, men and steel enough that no lord can simply ride in and help himself. And we need a real right to it, a charter, some standing in the law that makes this gold lawfully ours, so we can stop living like thieves crouched in our own hills. Enough hiding. It is time to stop being a secret and start being a power. But as the column files out through my gate, the old expert reins in his horse and looks back at me. One long, unhurried look. The look of a man filing a thing carefully away to take out again later. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. He found iron and trace and a peasant with an answer for everything. And he believed none of it. And he is going to turn these hills over in his mind the whole long ride home. The master of mines, troubled by a peasant who knows too much geology, does not carry his suspicions back to a baron who has already lost interest. He carries them up. For half my life, I watched men bury gold and call themselves rich, and every one of them was wrong. Gold in a chest is a dead thing. It sits. It waits to be stolen. It makes a man nothing but a target holding a shovel. I have spent these last months proving it the hard way, hiding a fortune under a forge floor while it bought me nothing but fear and a traitor at my back. So the day after the baron's expert rides off with his suspicions, I stop. I dig up every dull lump of gold from beneath that forge, and I do the one thing in this world I actually know how to do with money. I put it to work. This is the whole gospel of every trader who ever lived, and I should have trusted it sooner. A hoard can only be robbed. A trade cannot. Gold poured into a town that makes things and sells things and grows, stops being a secret you can hang for and becomes a wealth you can defend, explain, and multiply. A poor village sitting on a buried fortune is prey. A rich town that forges iron and trades with 3 counties is only a rich town, and nobody in the history of the world ever rode out to hang a man for a busy market. So the lie I built for the inspection, I make true. The show smelter where barren faked iron becomes a real ironworks. 3 forges where there was one, a long shed of workshops behind them, and barren at the head of all of it with a dozen apprentices learning to swing the hammer. He once swore he'd never light again. We make real goods now, tools, nails, hinges, blades. The dull vital hardware every village for 50 miles is starving for and can never get. We sell it. Real iron, real coin, an honest reason for carts to roll in and out of these hills. But a mine and a building site and an ironworks and a wall all want hands at once, and 60 souls cannot fill them. So I do the thing I swore I would on the morning we buried Peter. I open the gates. I send word down every road there is work here, and food and pay, and a share for any soul willing to earn it. And then the thing I half hoped for and never quite let myself believe begins to happen. They come. It starts as a rumor, the way the important things always do, carried mouth to mouth down the hungry roads of a hard country. There is a valley, men whisper, where a strange new lord feeds you, and pays you, and does not rob you, where there is work, and order, and walls that turn back bandits once already. In a land where most lords take and most winters starve, a rumor like that travels faster than any horse can run. And so they come, down every track into the hills, the hungry, the burned out, the masons and carpenters and weavers with no work and no bread, whole families with all they own strapped to their backs, walking days toward a place that simply refuses to let people die. I stand at the gate and sort them the way I once sorted cargo. A stonemason, yes, Galen will weep with joy. A tanner, a miller, a man who can fletch an arrow. Yes, yes, yes. The strong go to the mine, the skilled to the workshops, the rest to the building. By the end of the first month, the 60 souls I bought are 200. By the end of the second, 400 and still climbing, and the road keeps bringing more. And now Galen gets to build instead of patch. I turn him loose on the whole valley with gold enough to do it properly, and the man who spent years bitter with nothing to make comes roaring back to life. He lays the streets first, real ones, graded and drained, gravel over the old mud tracks so a cart can roll through a rainstorm. Then houses, true houses, timber and stone with proper roofs, rows of them climbing the slope where leaning hovels used to be. He raises a market square around the flat stone I once stood on to make my promise, so the stone that held a fool now holds the beating heart of a town. Warehouses go up, and granaries, because a place that means to last stores against the winter. And the water Lena runs the screws into channels and cisterns that carry clean water down into the streets, so the women who once hauled buckets from a poisoned well now draw it at their own doors. The wall pushes outward to ring all of it, longer and higher stone where it used to be wood. 2 of the faces the road brings me change everything. The first is a thin, ink-stained man named Conrad, who arrives looking back over his shoulder. He's a clerk, he says, fled the city a step ahead of a debt that was never his, and a magistrate who didn't care whose it was. He can read, write, cipher, keep a ledger, draw a contract, and the true gold in him, he knows how the law and the powerful actually work, having spent his whole life serving them before he ran from them. I have 400 people now, contracts with a dozen trades, wages to track, and a fight coming with powers I don't yet understand. So I put Conrad to the records, the contracts, the law. He is the first man here who knows the shape of the world beyond these hills. The second is a hard, scarred man named Derek, a soldier discharged or deserted. He doesn't say, and I don't ask. He has killed in real wars, drilled real men, stood in real lines that held when the screaming started. The bandits taught me that farmers and clever traps can win once, by surprise. They will not win twice. So I hand Derek the thing this town has needed since the night a scout walked my border. I tell him to build me an army, not a mob with stolen steel, soldiers. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, without my ever quite deciding it, the people I scraped out of the grave become something else entirely. Tom, the loud boy first to the fence to laugh at me, is captain of the guard now, the towers and the gates his to command, Derek's hard lessons in his hands. Barren runs the workshops. Galen runs the raising of a whole Elsa, the widow who would not trust me, runs the stores and the feeding of 400 mouths and still counts every grain. Only now the granary behind her is full to the rafters. And Lena, 13 years old, and the finest engineer I have ever known, stops merely drawing for me and starts teaching. A little school of apprentices, learning the cart and the pump and the sluice and the great crane. So the knowledge lives in 20 heads instead of dying in mine. I no longer run a village, I preside over a town that runs itself. Every piece of it in the hands of someone who grew into the holding of it. And they are rich, not me, them. I keep the books open for any man to read, and every soul who works takes a real share. Paid in good silver, and for the longest faithful, in gold. The digger Halls, who nearly lost his foot beneath the first great nugget, has a stone house with a real hearth and 3 children who go to bed fat and wake up fatter. Peter's widow, Peter, who died in the funnel of mud and stakes, wears wool instead of rags, and never once wants for bread, because I made his share his family's for as long as they live. The old woman who stood on the square and told me I'd traded a fortune for our graves sits now in the doorway of a good house in the afternoon sun, and when I pass she still won't quite meet my eye. But she nods. The whole valley that went in rags goes now in decent cloth. The starving are stout. The children who learned hunger are learning their letters. I walk into the market square one evening, 6 months almost to the very day since I climbed onto a flat stone and made 60 starving people a promise they howled at, and I stop. And I look. 6 months ago, a dying village. Empty barns, gray faces, a square full of people laughing themselves sick at the fool who'd robbed himself. An old woman crying out that these hills weren't worth 1 silver piece. And now, a town. Streets full of people with somewhere to be. Forges ringing, carts rolling, a market loud with trade, stone houses climbing the slopes, children chasing each other past storehouses full against the winter, a wall around all of it, and watchers turning on the towers. 400 souls and growing fed, paid, safe, and rich. I made them a promise. In 6 months, every person standing here will be wealthy, not fed, not getting by, wealthy. And the whole square laughed in my face. No one is laughing now. It cost everything I had. The gold, the machines, the blood, the lies. But the thing I swore on that stone is simply, plainly true. I told them I would make them rich, and I did. But here is the cruel arithmetic I should have seen riding toward me. The same old trap wearing a new and far larger face. A poor village could hide. A dying nothing up in the hills could be overlooked. A booming town that pulls 400 settlers off the roads of 3 counties, that sells iron to 50 villages, that builds in stone and pays its laborers in silver, that cannot hide from anyone alive. The name of the valley travels now the way the rumor of work once did, only farther, and into rooms the new lord has never seen. Merchants carry it to market towns carry it on to cities, and the old master of mines, who rode home from a poor iron village, troubled by a peasant who knew too much of rock, carries his suspicion precisely where a man like that carries it past the baron, past the count, up the long marble halls to the one court in all the kingdom that owns, by right older than any of them, every single grain of gold that sleeps in the ground. And then Conrad comes to me one evening with a letter in his ink-stained hand, and a look on his face I have not seen since the night a bandit walked my dark border counting houses. My lord, he says, he is the only soul here who calls me that, and he does not do it lightly. I still have friends in the city. People who hear things spoken in the right halls. He swallows. They are talking about us, in the palace. The king's own men are asking a question, and it is not a question about iron. He sets the letter on the table between us. By every law in this realm, the gold under these hills was never yours to keep. It was never the baron's either. Gold belongs to the crown, and the crown has just learned that it exists. Conrad sits me down that night and teaches me the one law that matters now. The law that turns everything I've built into a noose. Gold in the ground belongs to the king, he says. Not to the man who owns the land, not to the lord who holds that land of the king. To the crown, by a right older than any title in the realm. They call it the king's regality, and it has hanged better men than you. So here's what I am. In the eyes of a law I never knew I was breaking. Not a clever merchant who turned a dying village rich. A thief. A man who found the king's gold in the king's ground and dug it, and sold it, and hid it, and raised a whole town upon it, every ounce of it stolen from the crown. The penalty is not a fine, it is everything I own, seized and my neck stretched. The baron wanted a slice of my chicken. The king owns the entire farm, and the law that says so was written before my grandfather's grandfather drew breath. He comes 3 days later, and he is nothing at all like the baron. The baron was a wolf, greedy and clever, but a creature you could bargain with. The man who rides through my gate now is not a wolf. He is the law itself, wearing a face, a royal emissary, the king's own voice, a writ under the king's own seal in his glove, and a column of royal men-at-arms at his back, that makes Von Drake's 30 knights look like farm boys with sticks. He does not threaten me. He does not need to. He simply reads. He reads the writ aloud in the cold, flat voice of a man reading a verdict already decided. All gold in the realm is the crown's. This valley has mined and concealed a vein of it. A crime against the king's own person. The lawful sentence. Forfeiture of the mine, the town, and every coin of its wealth to the crown, and death for the man who did it. However, he says, and there is the velvet laid thin over the iron. His Majesty, in his mercy, is prepared to discuss terms, and there, riding at the emissary's right hand with a look I cannot quite read, is Von Drake. He is the one who brought this down on me. His expert's report carried up the long halls exactly as I feared it would be. He came, I'm certain, to watch me hang and pick the gold off my bones, But something has gone wrong with his smugness, because the emissary's cold eyes pass over the Baron too, and rest there a moment, and I watch Von Drake go very still, and I understand. The gold was found in the Baron's own domain. A vein worked half a year beneath his nose, and his crown learned of it from a wandering mine master and not from its own loyal lord. In the king's eyes, Von Drake is not the hero who unmasked a thief. He is the lord who either missed a fortune in his own country or helped to hide it. The Baron rode here to watch me drown, and has only just discovered that he is standing in the very same water. The royal emissary did not ride all this way for one peasant's neck. He rode for a question that troubles the men in the marble halls. How does a gold vein rich enough to raise a town go unfound and unreported in a baron's own land? The peasant will hang or kneel, that much is already decided. But the Baron the crown means to watch very closely now, and Von Drake knows it, and the knowing has wiped the smile clean off his clever face. That night, I do the thing I always do. I count my position, and for the first time since I climbed out of that first muddy hole, the count comes back empty. Against the Baron, I had walls and traps and terrain, and the law itself is a lever. Against the crown, I have none of it. My militia, Derek's farmers turned soldiers, 400 strong and growing, is a grim joke beside a royal host that numbers in the thousands. And it is worse than useless, because the instant I raise one blade against the king's men, I stop being a wronged townsman and become a rebel. And a rebel's town is one the crown is not merely permitted but bound to burn to the stones. Every man and woman and child inside it. I cannot fight. I cannot trap a kingdom in a funnel of mud. I cannot bribe a king who already owns, by law, everything I might offer him. And I cannot hide, because he already knows. Every weapon that ever saved me is gone. I am left with the only three things a man has when both the sword and the trick have failed him: my wits, the law, and whatever allies I can carve out of my own enemies. So Conrad and I do not sleep. We work the only ground left to stand on the law itself, and the one thing I understand better than any king alive: what a thing is actually worth. The crown wants the gold, I tell him. Not the mine, the wealth. Conrad nods slowly. Then I'll think like a buyer and not a victim. What does the king truly get if he seizes us outright, and we work it through? He gets a hole in the ground. He gets my machines, which his officers won't understand and will break inside a month. He gets 400 people who'll work like the resentful captives they've become. He gets a royal mine run by royal officials, who'll skim a third into their own purses before a single coin sees the treasury, and who couldn't find Jonas's vein with a map drawn for them. Seizing us hands the crown a mine. It does not hand the crown what only I can give it, because I can give it more gold, dug cleaner and faster, than any royal officer breathing, and I can give it lawfully, with my methods and my people and my system, taking nothing the king is owed, and delivering more than he could ever wring out of these hills himself. It is the very same move I have made my whole life. Only now the buyer is a kingdom. Do not be the chicken the king takes. Be the man who makes the king's chicken lay twice the eggs. The shape of it could be a royal charter, granting us the right to work the gold in the king's name. A standing place as the crown's own supplier, paid and protected. Even Conrad says it carefully. The way a man handles a live coal, a royal mint, the right to strike the king's coin, here, under our own hands. Make this town not a thing the crown can own, but a thing the crown cannot afford to break. But there are two ways to play it, and the gap between them is the whole gap between living and merely staying alive. The first way is to bend, accept the monopoly, let the crown take the mine and the town as its lawful property, and beg to be kept on as the man who runs it. We would survive. I'd keep my neck. My people would keep their lives. But the gold becomes the king's, and the town becomes the king's. And every word I swore to these people on that flat stone becomes a lie. They would be the crown's mine serfs, and I would be the crown's hired overseer of the thing I built out of their blood. Survival, bought with the soul of the place. The second way is to gamble all of it. Go before the king and refuse to be a servant bargain, instead for a charter that makes us a free town, a chartered city with the right to our own gold and the rule of our own affairs, paying the crown its royal share, but keeping what we built and governing ourselves. Not a possession, a partner. If it works, this valley is free and shielded by the king's own seal for all time. If it fails, if I overreach, if I insult a king to his face by asking to stand as his partner instead of kneeling as his property, there is no second offer. There is a rope, and then a royal host, and then ash. The safe road is chains, the bold road is freedom, or the great, and I already know which road a man who traded everything he owned for a dying village, on the strength of a glint in the dirt, is going to choose. The emissary does not give me long to choose it. He folds his writ, and he looks at me with eyes like a closed and balanced account, and he speaks the crown's will. I'm to come to the capital, to the court, to stand before the king's own council and answer for the gold of these hills, and to receive whatever judgment the crown sees fit to pronounce. I am to come alone. No army at my back. No town, no walls. Just one man and whatever he can carry in his two hands and his own mouth. And should I not come, should I delay, or bar my gate, or so much as flinch, the king will send a host to take these hills by force, hang me as a rebel and a thief, and hand my town to whatever lord pleases him that season. There is no refusing, there is no hiding, there is no trap, no wall, no clever machine that saves me now. In a handful of days I ride to the capital, alone, to stand before the most powerful man in the kingdom, and everything I have built, every soul who trusted me, every promise I ever kept, will live or die on whether a peasant merchant can outtalk a king. The hard part was never the gold. It was never even the men who wanted it. The hard part is the one man who, by a law older than memory, already owns it, and the few short days I have to find the words that keep my neck out of his noose. A man who walks into a king's court with empty hands walks back out on the end of a rope. I have a handful of days before I ride to the capital, and I do not mean to spend them being afraid. I mean to spend them filling my hands, not with weapons. No sword saves me now, no trap, no wall. I'm not building an army to beat a king. You cannot beat a king with 400 farmers, and the trying only gets your town burned with everyone in it. I'm building something else. I'm building reasons, the things that make a king want to deal with me rather than hang me, and I will carry them to court, not as a beggar, but as a man with 4 cards in his hand, and the nerve to lay them down in front of the most dangerous man alive. The first card is the one Conrad builds, and he builds it in ink. For 3 days the clerk does nothing but figure, filling page after page, turning everything this valley is into the only language a king truly reads. Money. He sets it down cold. The mine yields, in a single season, more gold than the king's own reeve, squeezes out of 3 counties of farmland in a year. The workshops turn out iron goods sold to 50 villages, 400 people, the road still bringing more, every one of them working, paying, producing. And then Conrad does the cruel arithmetic that moves kings. 2 columns, side by side. In the one, what the crown gets if it seizes us. A mine run by royal officers will skim a third before it sees the treasury. Machines they'll break inside a month. A sullen town that drags its feet. A garrison the king must pay to keep us down. In the other, what the crown gets if it charters us a royal share of a mine run better than any officer alive could run it. Delivered every season, free, no cost, no soldiers, no trouble. The first column is a number. The second is a much larger number. Give a king a ledger that proves mercy pays better than murder, I tell Conrad, and you've done half my work before I open my mouth. The second card is the one no royal officer in the realm can match, and it cost me months of broken frames and snapped ropes to earn. The crane, the sluice, the water screw, the rail and the cart, and the shored gallery. The crown has gold in other ground than mine. Old royal mines worked by men with picks and baskets, the slow, brutal way the whole world has always dug. My methods could double the yield of every one of them. So I'm not only offering the king this valley's gold, I'm offering him the knowledge that makes all gold cheaper to drag out of the earth, worth more than any single mine, worth more across his whole kingdom than he can guess. And here's the edge of it. Hang me. And that knowledge rots in the dirt with my body. Deal with me, and you gain an engineer who can enrich every mine you own. Lena draws the machines clean, plate after plate, and Conrad sets the methods down in words. Not the whole of it, never the whole of it, only enough to show a king exactly what he'd be killing if he killed me. The full system stays in my head and my people's hands. That is the chip. You do not hand a king the thing he wants. You show him its edge and make him want you alive to get the rest. The third card nearly starts a war inside my own walls before I ever reach the king's. I spend gold like water, and I spend it on war. I send Conrad's contacts out with heavy purses, and they come back leading sellswords, seasoned men, veterans for hire, a hard professional core to stiffen what I have. Boren's workshops stop making hinges and start making death. I put the forging of arms on a line, the way I put everything on a line, spearheads by the rack, helmets hammered to a single pattern, mail and shields turned out faster than one smith ever dreamed possible. And Derek and Tom take 400 farmers and settlers and forge them into something that stands in ranks and holds not the trap and run mob that broke the bandits, but a garrison, drilled, disciplined, armed. But I make the purpose iron hard to every man who will listen, because the wrong idea here kills us all. This army is not to fight the king. We cannot fight the king. 400 soldiers behind stone are nothing against a royal host of thousands, and the day we raise one blade against the crown we are rebels, and rebels are burned down to the last child. This army has exactly one job, and it is not killing. It is arithmetic. A poor, undefended village the king takes with a walk and a writ. A walled, garrisoned, provisioned town of armed men. He takes only with a real siege months, blood, treasure, royal soldiers dying on my stone. I am not making myself unbeatable. I'm making myself expensive. I'm raising the price of crushing me until a deal looks cheaper to a greedy king than a war. A royal scout, sent ahead to look the rebel town over, rides back to the column with an uneasy report. The place is not what the writ described. Stone walls and towers, and men drilling in ranks beneath a hard-faced captain, and a forge that never cools turning out spears by the cartload. It can still be taken, the scout allows, but it will cost. And that single word cost is the whole of what the new man wants the king to be chewing on before he ever opens his mouth in that hall. The fourth card I have to go and collect myself, and I collect it from the very man who tried to bury me. Von Drake is exposed now, and we both know it. A gold vein found in his own country. His crown told of it by a wandering stranger, and not by him. In the king's eyes, he is either a fool or an accomplice, and either one can cost a baron his head. So I ride to his castle, and I make the wolf an offer. My voice at court can shape how he looks to the king. I can name him the loyal lord who helped unmask a thief, or leave the crown to go on wondering what he knew and when. In exchange, his voice backs my charter, and his knowledge of the court tells me who at the king's table can be moved and who cannot. The man who informed on me becomes, by the plain force of shared danger, my reluctant ally. And through Conrad's whispers, I learned there are lords who chafe under the crown's grasping monopolies, who might welcome the precedent of a chartered free city, a few quiet voices I may be able to count on if I play the hall right. It is not much against a king. A few cards and a few friends is the whole of the hand I'll hold. And then there are my people, who do not want me to go at all. Elsa says it plainest. The widow who counts everything and has counted this too. It's a trap, and you know it's a trap. They call you to court alone to get you away from your walls and your men, and then they hang you quiet and take a town with no head left on it. Don't go. She is not wrong. It might be precisely that. Barren wants to fight, of course he does. The man arms a garrison from dawn to dark. Let them come and pay for it, he growls. We have walls. We have steel. I'd sooner die on my own stone than dance for a king who means to hang me anyway. And Tom, my captain, gone from a boy jeering at a fence to a man who commands men, brings me an actual plan, a way to fortify, to resist, to make them bleed for every foot of the valley. It is a good plan, it is brave, and it is suicide, and I tell him so to his face. The day we lift one sword against the crown, we stop being a town the king might bargain with, and become a thing he is bound to destroy. Every wall we hold, every soldier we kill, is one more reason to scrape us off the earth. Force is the single move on this board that loses every time it's played. I'm talking my own people down off the very instinct that once saved them. Because the thing that beat the bandits is the thing that gets us all hanged now. And I go anyway, because Elsa is right, that it may be a trap, but refusing is not safety. Refusing is the host at our gates by month's end. Certain going is a chance at the table. Certain war, or a chance with words. I have built my whole life out of choosing the chance. I leave the town to my people, every piece of it in steady hand. I take no soldiers, the summons said, come alone, and a man may bring no army. But a man may bring his clerk, and I will need Conrad's law far more than any blade. And somewhere behind me as I ride out, the snake I never found is still curled inside my own walls. And there is nothing left to do about that now, but pray it holds its bite until I'm home. Everything I built, every soul who trusted me, every promise I kept on that flat stone, rides now on one single thing. Not gold, not steel. On whether I can stand in front of a king and find the right words. The capital is a thing I have no scale for. I have driven my cart into 100 towns, and not one of them is a tenth of this walls higher than my crane. Towers of stone climbing into the sky. More people pressed into a single street than live in the whole of my valley. Somewhere at the heart of it sits the man who owns, by a law older than memory, every grain of gold in my hills and my neck along with it. I ride in through a gate tall enough to swallow a church, and behind me, with a sound like the closing of a vault, the gates of the capital swing shut. In a high hall of pale stone, the king's council is already seated and waiting, the charges laid out. The verdict all but written, the baron's report and the minemaster's suspicion stacked neat upon the table. They expect a frightened peasant who struck gold and will weep and grovel and hang. They have no idea that the man riding up through their streets has spent his entire life learning the one trade that is about to walk into their hall, knowing the exact worth of a thing, and selling it to someone who does not. The hall they bring me into is built to make a man feel small, and it works. Stone columns climbing up into shadow, a floor of polished marble I can see my own dirt-poor reflection in, and at the far end of it, raised on a dais above every other soul in the room, the king. I have stood in front of barons and bandits and starving mobs. I have never once stood in front of a man who can end my life with a word and a nod and watch it done before his wine goes warm. The court is arrayed below him, lords in cloth, worth more than my whole valley used to be. Clerks, guards, the entire machinery of the one power in the kingdom that owns me. And there, near the front, exactly where they want to be for the spectacle, stand the two men who came to watch me die, the royal emissary who read me my death writ, and the baron, von Drake, who rode all this way to see a peasant hang. The emissary speaks first, and he speaks to bury me. He lays the charges before the king in that flat, cold voice, a commoner who found the crown's gold, concealed it, sold it, raised a town upon it, and armed that town against his own sovereign. He asks, almost lazily, for the sentence the law demands. Death, forfeiture. He expects it to be a formality, a stamp pressed onto a page already written. The baron stands ready to add his voice and be the loyal lord who unmasked a thief, and the whole court leans in for the part they came to see. The peasant on his knees, weeping, begging, dragged out to the rope. I do not kneel. I do not weep. I do the one thing not a soul in this hall has prepared for, because not one of them has ever bought or sold anything in their lives. I make the king an offer, your majesty. I say, and my voice does not shake, because I have spent these last days making certain that it would not. The law is precisely as your emissary says it is. The gold beneath those hills is yours. It was always yours. I will not stand here and pretend otherwise. The court stirs. They braced for defiance or for groveling, and I have handed them neither. I have agreed. I have stripped the rebel's frame off myself with a single sentence, because a man who admits the king owns the gold is not a rebel. He is a subject with a proposal. So the only question before this I go on is not whether the gold is yours, Majesty. It is how much of it you would actually like to hold in your hand. Then I play the first card, and Conrad's ledgers come out, and I turn the king's own greed into the finest advocate I could ever hire. Hang me, Majesty, and seize the mine, and here is what you own by sundown. A hole in the ground, machines your officers cannot work, and will break inside a month. 400 people who will dig like the captives they've become, and a royal mine run by royal officers who, with the deepest respect to this court, will take their third before a single coin ever reaches your treasury. A few of the lords shift in their places. Every man in this room knows it for the truth. Or charter me. Let me work that mine with my own people and my own methods. Take your royal share off the top of it every year, and you will hold more gold delivered freely, costing you not one soldier and not one coin to keep, than you could ever tear out of those hills by force. This is not mercy weighed against justice, Majesty. It is a smaller pile of gold weighed against a larger one. And then I show him why my pile is the larger. I have Conrad spread Lena's drawings on the marble before the throne, the crane, the screw, the sluice, machines no royal mine in the realm has ever laid eyes on. Your Majesty holds other mines, old ones, worked with picks and baskets, the slow way the whole world has always dug. These methods are mine, and they would double the yield of every one of them. Hang me, and they rot in the ground with my body. Keep me, and I do not enrich one valley for my king. I enrich his entire kingdom. I watch the king's eyes travel over the drawings, and I watch a shrewd man begin to do arithmetic, and I know in that moment that he is listening. But they will not let it land without a fight, and the emissary comes at me with the only weapon he has left. Majesty, this is a thief and a rebel playing at sums. He armed a town against your crown. He lied to the face of your own lord about iron. Why should the king trust a single word from a man who has done nothing but conceal and deceive since the hour he found your gold? And the baron takes his cue and draws himself up to drive the knife home, to name me a liar, a fraud, a peasant who made a fool of him. I let him begin. And then I take the last card, the one I rode to his own castle to collect, and I lay it down on the marble in front of the entire court. My lord baron calls me a deceiver, I say, mild as milk, and he is right. I hid the truth of those hills, but let us be precise about whose hills they are. That gold was found in the baron's own domain. It was dug and sold for half a year, on land held by him under his own protection, while he rode to my gate and collected my silver and called it iron with his own mouth. I turn from the baron to the king, and I say the thing that ends it. So either my lord baron is so poor a steward that a fortune was mined in his own country for half a year and he never knew, or he knew and said nothing to his king. I leave it to wiser men than myself to judge which. I know only that the man calling me a thief has been quietly pocketing the proceeds of the very crime he accuses me of. The court does not gasp. A court is far too well trained to gasp. But something shifts through the room like a tide turning, and every eye that had been fixed upon the peasant slides instead to the baron, who has gone the gray of old ash. Von Drake rode to this hall to watch a fool hang, and has discovered, in front of the one man whose opinion can unmake him, that the fool has just hung him instead. And this is the slap, and it falls across far more faces than one. Every man who ever looked at me and saw a simpleton to be robbed, the landowner who traded me a dying village and laughed all the way down the road, the baron who left my valley certain he had outwitted an idiot is answered now, here, at the highest court in the kingdom, where a peasant they all dismissed has outthought a lord to his face in front of his king. And the king, who is no fool, who has sat through every word of this weighing, not justice but profit, makes his choice. The king has watched a great many men stand where this one stands, and nearly all of them either groveled or threatened, and he hanged them all the same. This one did neither. This one did the single thing a king almost never sees done. He offered the crown a better bargain than the crown could make for itself. The king is not moved by the man, he is moved by the math, and a king moved by math is the easiest king in all the world to deal with, which is the very thing the peasant staked his neck upon. He grants the charter, the words come down from the dais, and they remake my life and every life in my valley. The town is to be a free and chartered city, with the lawful right to mine the gold of its own hills, under the crown's monopoly in name, and a royal share in fact, sealed by the king's own hand. No baron may touch it, no bandit, no lord, no grasping neighbor may lay a finger on it, without laying that finger upon the king's own protected city, and the law and the royal host that once stood ready to burn me, now stand instead between my people and every wolf that ever circled them. I have won. I have done the one thing that could not be done, out-talked a king, walked into a death sentence and walked back out with a city. But nothing the crown gives is ever given free, and I feel the chains close even as the king speaks them. A royal share of every ounce, a full third of all the valley yields, paid to the crown each year, for as long as there is gold to dig. The charter is the king's to grant and the king's to revoke. I hold it at his pleasure, which is to say I hold it exactly as long as the gold flows and the king stays content, and not one day past. A royal officer will live within my walls, the crown's permanent eye watching every move I make. And I myself, the wandering merchant who once owned nothing in this world but a cart and a horse, and answered to no living man who could turn his back on any trouble and ride away from it down an open road. I will never be free again. I kneel, and I swear the oath, and as I rise I understand precisely what I have bought. I have made my people free and safe and rich by selling away the very last of my own freedom to a king. I am his man now to the end of my days on a golden chain I forged with my own 2 hands. It is the finest deal I have ever made in my life. It is also the most expensive. The emissary who came to hang me draws up the charter in a hand stiff with disbelief. The baron rides home a smaller man than he came, watched now by a crown that has begun to wonder what else he has hidden. And I, a lord of a chartered city, by the grace of a king who owns me body and soul, ride for home with a parchment under my coat worth more than all the gold I ever dragged out of the dark, and a weight upon my shoulders that I will carry into my grave. I traded a cart for a dying village once, on the strength of a glint in the dirt, and the man who took the cart laughed at the fool he'd robbed. Tonight I have traded my own freedom for a city of 400 souls who will sleep safe under the king's seal because of it. Some bargains a man doesn't regret. He simply pays them and rides on. I rode out of my valley alone to die, and I ride back into it a lord. The whole place comes out to meet me on the road, and it is a city now. I see it the instant I crest the last rise, the thing I left and the thing I returned to, no longer the same place at all. They line the paved road that used to be a mud track, 400 faces and more, and when I lift the sealed parchment that makes them free, the sound they throw up rolls back off the new stone walls and fills the whole valley like water. Galen meets me at the gate, Barren, Elsa with a ledger still tucked under her arm out of pure habit, Tom at the head of a guard in matched steel, Lena, ink on her fingers, and old Jonas, leaning on his bone-smooth stick, who looks at me, and then up at the walls of the city, his grandfather's madness, built, and says not one word because there is nothing left that needs saying. I have the charter. We are safe. We are free, and no one but me feels the true weight of what it cost, so I carry that quietly, and I let them have their day. Galen has not been idle while I was off gambling my neck. The man builds the way other men breathe, and with gold enough and a city's worth of hands, he has finished the thing he started. The palisade is gone. In its place stands a real wall dressed stone, thick enough to break a ram's heart, towers at the corners, and a gatehouse that could hold an army in the doorway. Inside it, the mud is gone too, streets cobbled and drained, so a cart rolls clean through a thunderstorm, and a child's feet stay dry crossing them. At the heart of it, where I once climbed onto a flat stone and promised 60 starving people they would be rich, Galen has raised the market square, and the stone is still there, set into the paving at its center, because I told him to leave it, and around it the market roars from dawn to dark, stalls and traders, and the endless noise of money changing hands. A town hall faces the square, where a free city governs its own affairs under its own seal. A temple beside it, a bell ringing the hours out over rooftops that used to be hovels, warehouses and granaries along the inside of the walls, fat against any winter that comes, rows of true houses climbing the slopes, stone and good timber, smoke from every chimney, and the building I am prouder of than any of them, Lena's school, where 24 apprentices bend over slates and drawings, learning the crane and the screw and the sluice, so that what lives in one girl's head will live in 20 more when she is gone. And out on the road beyond the gates, a thing I never had to build at all, inns, stables, guest houses. Because people are coming now who need a place to sleep. That is what stops me in my tracks the day I walk the whole city. The road, when I first drove my cart up that track, it brought me to a dying nothing. Then it brought bandits. Then it brought the starving and the burned out walking days for a loaf of bread. And now it brings merchants. Caravans, strings of laden mules and ox carts, traders from 3 counties and farther out, rolling up to my gates not to take a single thing but to buy, to sell, to settle, to work. My iron goes out on those carts. Their cloth and salt and spice come rolling in, and the city I built has become, without my lifting a finger to make it so, a place worth the journey. A trader from the far side of the kingdom rounds the last bend in the road, and reins in his mules and simply stares. He set out chasing a rumor, a new city up in the hills, they said, where the markets are rich and the roads are safe, and a man can do honest business unrobbed. He did not half believe it, but there it stands, stone walls, a gate thrown wide, a market he can hear from here. Guards in good steel who wave him through with a nod instead of a leveled spear. He clicks his tongue and rolls his cart forward, toward the city, the way men have rolled their carts toward the places worth reaching, since the world began. And standing at my own gate watching him come, I finally see the shape of the circle I have closed. I spent 12 years on the road, a wandering merchant chasing markets across the world, buying cheap in one town to sell dear in the next. Always moving, always arriving somewhere that belonged to another man, and now the road brings them to me. I stopped chasing the market. I built one. The thing I spent my whole life traveling toward. I made out of a glint in the dirt in a dying village, and now other men do the traveling, toward the place that I made. Let me count it. because I always count and because this is the sweetest count I have ever made. 6 months and a little more ago. 60 starving souls, empty barns, one cracked shovel, a village not worth a single piece of silver. Today, near 1,000 people inside these walls and the number still climbing. 3 great workshops under Barren and his apprentices, turning out iron for half the kingdom. A mine that yields more gold in one season than a whole county yields in a year, even after the crown carves away its third. Granaries full, warehouses full. Hundreds of stone houses where hovels leaned, a market that pulls trade from 3 counties, and a garrison of trained armed men standing behind real walls, and the people themselves. Halls, who nearly lost his foot beneath the first great nugget, owns a house and a workshop of his own now, and 3 fat children who have never known a single hungry night. Peter's widow wants for nothing, and never will. The old woman who stood on the square and swore these hills weren't worth a silver piece, sits in the sun outside a good stone house these days, and she meets my eye now, and she smiles. Every soul who laughed me off that flat stone on the first morning is rich. I made them a promise. I kept it, down to the last man and woman of them, and the people I scraped out of the grave have become the spine of a city. Boren the drunk slumped beside a cold forge, runs a workshop with 30 apprentices, and stands taller than any amount of gold could ever make a man stand. Galen, who came home bitter with nothing left to build, is the architect of a whole city, and you can read it in the way he walks his own streets. Tom, the loud boy who was first to the fence to mock me, commands the guard in matched steel at Derek's side, the veteran who forged farmers into soldiers. Elsa, who would not trust me, runs the supply in the stores of 1,000 mouths and counts every grain still, only now the granary behind her is always full to the beams. Conrad, the hunted clerk who arrived looking over his shoulder, is chancellor of a chartered city. Its law and its records his to hold. And Lena, 13 years old when she fixed my broken cart. The finest engineer I have ever known is master of the works and master of her own school. The knowledge in her head already taking root in 20 more. And Jonas, old Jonas who knew about the gold before any of us, who buried his family in ground the whole world called worthless. He sits in a place of honor now, the elder of a golden city, and the young ones bring him their quarrels to settle and call him grandfather. One evening I find him at the wall, looking out over the city in the last of the light, and he doesn't turn. He only says it quiet. He'd have liked to see this. My grandfather, he'd have stood right here, and not believed his own 2 eyes. And then, softer still, he'd have been proud. I don't know if he means his grandfather or himself or me. Maybe he means all 3. We are safe. We are free. All 3 wolves that hunted us, the bandits, the barren, the crown, are answered on this turn. The bandits broken, the barren neutered, and watched by a suspicious king. The crown itself turned from my executioner into my partner. By every measure a man can name, I have won. And still I do not sleep easy, because I'm the only one who carries what the winning truly cost. A royal officer walks my streets and writes down everything he sees. 1/3 of everything we dig rides away to the capital every season. The charter that makes us free is a sheet of parchment a king can put to the fire on a whim, and I hold it only so long as the gold keeps flowing and the king stays pleased. I traded the open road for a golden chain, and the chain is real, even on the brightest day of my life. And somewhere in this thriving city, the snake I never found still has not shown its face. A man who sold me once and could sell me again, sleeping under a roof I raised, eating bread I bought him, but that is tomorrow's reckoning. Tonight I stand on the wall Galen built, over a city that was a grave when I bought it, and I let myself see it plainly. It was never the gold that did this. I have watched enough men dig up enough fortunes to know that gold alone makes a man a target and nothing more. The gold was only ever the seed. What turned a dying village into a city was all the rest of it. The machines, the work, the people, the order, every hand that learned to trade, and every back that learned to stand straight. I did not grow rich digging gold out of the ground. I grew rich by building something with it. That is the whole of the secret, and most men go to their graves never learning it. 60 starving people once laughed me off a flat stone. Tonight 1,000 of them sleep safe behind stone walls under a king's seal, in a city that did not exist a year ago. I keep my promises. It is the most expensive habit I own, and far beyond these hills and halls the new lord has never seen. The name of a golden city is beginning to travel past the markets, past the barrens, into the kind of rooms where powerful men grow, very interested indeed in places that have suddenly become worth the taking. A poor village can be overlooked. A golden city cannot. But that is a trouble for another season. Tonight it simply shines. 3 times the world taught me the same lesson, and I'm done being a slow student. Bandits came for my silver, a baron came for my gold, a king came for my neck. Every one of them came because I owned a thing worth taking and had no way to keep it, and every one of them I beat with a trick or a bargain because I had nothing else to fight with. But a trick works once. A bargain holds only as long as the other man wants it to. I am tired of surviving on cleverness alone. Wealth without strength is not wealth. It is bait, and I have spent a whole year being bait. So now, with gold in the ground, and a king's seal on my right to keep it, I build the one thing this valley has never had, and every place worth keeping has always needed. I build teeth not to conquer anyone. I have no quarrel I care to start, but to make my city so costly to take that no wolf in his right mind ever tries. Boren is a master now with workshops and apprentices, and I turn his production line from tools to war. He makes death the way he learned to make hinges, by the pattern, by the rack, by the cartload. Spearheads ground to a single shape, 100 a week. Sword blades cut to one template. Helmets beaten over a form so every man's skull is covered the same. Mail shirts, shields faced in iron, turned out faster than any village armory ever dreamed possible. By the end of a season, my storehouses hold steel enough to arm every able body in the city twice over. And then I turn the thing I am truly good at, machines, onto the walls. The same principles that lifted half a ton of gold out of a black shaft will throw half a hundredweight of stone at any army fool enough to come close. I build ballistas for the towers, great crossbows whose stored force of twisted cord and bent timber drives a bolt clean through a shield and the man behind it. I build counterweight engines on the very logic of my crane's boom, a long throwing arm, a cradle of stone for the counterweight, a sling that hurls a boulder farther than any bow can reach. Lena works the numbers for me, the range and the weight and the swing of the arm, exactly the way she once worked the tackle, and we range them in until they drop a stone where we want it every time. The machines that raised my city become the machines that guard it. While Boren arms them, and I engine the walls, Derek and Tom make soldiers real ones. Derek drills the garrison day after day, until farmers who held nothing but a hoe a year ago stand in ranks that do not break, lock their shields, and move on a single shouted word. Tom commands them. And the loud boy who jeered at me from a fence is a captain that grown men follow without question. Gold buys horses, so I have cavalry now, a hard-mounted corps. Gold buys bows and the long months it takes to learn them, so I have archers who can darken the sky over the gate. Drill and discipline, and the patience to do one thing 1,000 times until it lives in the hands without thought. And Galen turns his city into a fortress. A moat dug deep and wide around the stone, so no ram comes at the gate dry-shod. Bastions thrown out from the wall at the corners. Platforms that let my engines and my bowmen rake any man who comes against the stone from the flank as well as the front. The gatehouse doubled, a killing ground laid between two sets of iron-bound doors. The man who built a city now builds a thing designed to break an army on its own threshold. And because drill can never buy experience, and only blood teaches some lessons, I spend gold on men who have already bled. Veteran sellswords, masters of war, men who have stood in real lines when the screaming started. I hire them as the hard professional spine of the whole thing, to lead my green companies and teach them what no parade ground ever can. Gold buys the single thing my people do not yet have, men who already know. By season's end, I command a true force, 800 trained foot, 100 horse, 300 bows, engines on every tower, all of it behind a moat and a wall of dressed stone. A year ago, this was 60 starving people and a cracked shovel. And then, as though the world means to test the work, the wolves come. They come the way wolves have always come to these hills, drawn by the smell of gold, riding on old stories. A raiding band, hundreds strong, brigands and broken men and hired blades, more of them than the bandits who first bled us. They have heard there is a rich little town up in the hills, a lucky village stuffed with gold and soft as fresh butter, and they ride in expecting the village I bought, not the city I built. The raider captain has done his homework, or believes he has. A peasant struck gold, the story goes, and rose above his station, and a fat, soft place like that is a whole winter's plunder for any man bold enough to ride in and take it. He brings 300 men over the last rise at dawn, already grinning, already counting the gold, and what he sees freezes the grin on his face. A moat, a wall of stone with towers, engines swinging up onto the battlements, and in the open ground before the gate, not a panicked mob of farmers, but ranks of armored men standing dead still, waiting for him, horsemen on the flanks, and the dawn light running red along 300 drawn bows. He has not led an army down upon a village. He has marched a mob into the open jaws of a fortress. It is not a battle. It is a lesson. They have one card I did not expect, and it turns out to be the snake I never found. As the raiders close on the wall, a man inside my own gate moves to throw the bar and swing it wide for them. The inside man, the one who sold me to the Baron and now means to sell me to these. But a chartered city keeps a watch that never sleeps, and Tom's men take him before his hands ever reach the bar. The gate holds. The traitor is hauled away with a face I can finally put to the betrayal, and the last hidden hole in my defenses closes shut behind him. And then my engines speak, and the lesson begins in earnest. Stones from the counterweight arms come down among the packed raiders before they are even in bowshot, and the ballistas knock men off their feet at 200 paces. And when the band breaks and runs, Tom looses the cavalry, and Derek's foot advance in a line that does not so much as ripple. The men who came for a soft village die in the open ground, or flee broken back over the rise, and we count a handful of wounded, and not one soul more. A year ago, against 30 bandits, I lost Peter and bled hard for the win. Today, against 300 behind walls and engines and trained men, I barely bleed at all. What rides out of these hills after that dawn is not a raiding band. It is a story carried fast down every road by the few who live to tell it. There is a city up in the hills, the story says, that gleams like gold and bites like a wolf, stone walls and engines and a standing army where a soft little village used to sit, and the men who rode to plunder it did not ride home, but By the time that story has crossed 3 counties, every brigand and every greedy lordling who ever eyed those hills has quietly struck them off his list. The Golden City is not to be touched. That is the whole of what I wanted, not glory, deterrence. Walls high enough and teeth sharp enough that the wolves choose easier prey and my people sleep the night through. But I count honestly, even drunk, on a clean victory. Because a man who lies to himself about his own strength is a dead man who simply hasn't fallen yet. I have built a mighty thing for what it is, against bandits, against raiders, against a baron's whole levy if it ever dared to come. My walls and my engines and my 800 would hold them and break them on the stone. Against the king they would not. I do not fool myself for a single heartbeat. A royal host is not 300 brigands. It is thousands of professional soldiers, with their own engines and their own veterans, and the entire weight of a kingdom standing behind them. And if the king ever chose to take this city by force, my proud little army would buy my people 1 hard week and a great many graves, and then it would end the only way it ever could. A neighboring crown, a foreign power with a real army of its own. The same, my strength is real. It is also small. It guards me well against the wolves of the past. It would not stand an hour against the great powers of the world. So I have done a great thing, and I know exactly how large it is, and exactly where it stops. I have made a city the bandits and the barons and the brigands will never again dare to touch. I have turned a year of gold into a shield, and the shield is good, and it is enough for everything I have already faced. It is not enough for what a golden city draws to itself. In time, I built teeth to frighten wolves. But I sit on a leash held by a king, in a world where far larger things than wolves have started, quietly, to learn my name. For tonight the walls are high, the watch is set, and the city sleeps safe. For tonight, that is enough. I stand on the wall at dawn and look at what a glint in the dirt became. Below me the garrison drills in the cold light, 800 men moving as one body on a single shouted word, the engines black against the sky on every tower. Beyond the gate the roads run out in 3 directions, and on every one of them a caravan crawls toward my market mules and ox carts and traders from counties I have never seen. All of them coming to a place that did not exist a year ago. The forges are already ringing. The mine is already turning. 1,000 souls who once starved are waking up rich behind stone walls, under a king's own seal. I have won. Every wolf that ever came for these hills is broken or bought or buried. And then the rider comes up the road, and he does not look like good news. He wears the king's colors and he carries a letter under the king's own seal, and Conrad's face goes gray before he has read 3 lines of it. My lord, he says, the king is calling in his charter, not revoking it, calling it in, using it. The letter is no courtesy, it is a demand, and as Conrad reads it aloud, the whole shape of the thing I thought I had won twists in my hands. The king is going to war. A great war. A war between crowns against the kingdom that borders ours to the east. And a war between crowns is paid for in one thing only, and that thing is gold. My gold. The charter that made us free was never the king's mercy. It was the king's purse, set quietly aside against the day he would need it. And that day has come. I see the whole of it at once now, the entire trap I walked into smiling. The king did not spare my neck because the arithmetic was good. He spared me because a wise king does not slaughter the goose the very season before he will need a mountain of golden eggs. I am not a free lord with a chartered city. I am the war chest of a king, and he means to pour me out into a war that is not mine, and I cannot refuse him, because the charter that keeps my people free is a single sheet of parchment he can put to the fire the instant I say no, and that is only the first edge of the blade. Because Conrad reads on, and his voice drops low, and he tells me the thing that turns my blood to water in my veins. A war has 2 sides, and the moment the kingdom to the east learns who fills the war chest of its enemy, learns that one new city up in the hills is paying for the whole army gathering at its border, that city stops being a far-off rumor and becomes the single most valuable target in the war. Not a baron's wounded pride, not 300 brigands writing off old stories. A kingdom. An army of thousands, with its own engines and its own veterans and the entire weight of a foreign crown behind it. The very thing I stood on this same wall a week ago and admitted plainly that my 800 could not hold for 1 single hour. Far to the east, in the war hall of a foreign crown, a great map is unrolled across a table, and a finger comes down upon a small mark in the hills of the enemy's country. Gold, the spy master says quietly. Their entire war runs on one city, and the city is new and rich and barely defended. Take it or burn it to the ground, and the enemy's army starves in the field before the first true battle is ever fought. The generals lean in over the map, and they begin very calmly to plan. I stand on my wall, over my army, and my caravans, and my 1,000 sleeping souls, and I hold in my hand a letter that has just made my golden city the most wanted prize in 2 kingdoms at once. A year ago, a man told me this land was not worth a single piece of silver, and he laughed all the way down the road as he rode off with my cart. Tonight, 2 crowns are readying to go to war over it. I won a village, now I have to hold an empire.